is a vintage frame, probably from the 70s. It's that plastic molded frame, and the print inside is in horrible shape. It's really sun faded, and it was only $3.19. Yes, this had to come home with me because I knew I could upcycle it. And trust me, you don't have to be an artist to do this upcycle. I know nothing about oil painting or watercolor paints. I just have cracked out my acrylic paint, and I'm kind of thinking back to what the original color of this print wouldn't be, and then using my acrylic paints to match it the best I can. And I'm kind of dabbing up and down. In the areas of the grass, I'm using this beautiful green, and by using that dabbing motion, it kind of gives the illusion that it's that original oil painting. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to work away on this whole print and make those colors vibrant again. This turned out absolutely beautiful, and for $3.19 I was able to save this print, and when it was finished it looks like a oil painting. So look through the thrift store frames. If you see something that's sun faded or just doesn't look as vibrant anymore, you can try this technique. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Oil paintings are never really perfect, so give it a go. I'm also going in with a little bit of Kleenex and just dabbing it here and there to give it a little bit more texture too, and to blend it in. Now this was just a print, it wasn't an original. But you could even do this on a original oil painting or watercolor painting. Just make sure before you do that you're making sure that it's not worth any money or that it's not a collectible. We don't want to be ruining somebody's original artwork. This, of course, is just a print, so we were good to go. This project I found was so relaxing. I went out to my shed, I put on a podcast, I made a cup of tea, and I just worked away at this, and it took me about an hour. I thoroughly enjoyed this project. So relaxing, blending paints and dabbing it up and down. Definitely going to be looking for more projects like this to do at the thrift store. Have this all painted and finished. It's much more vibrant, way better than the before, but I still want to seal this up. So I'm going to get out my Mod Podge. I'm using my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to pour a little bit in a dish, and I'm going to take my paintbrush and paint over this entire print with a sponge. I want to dab it up and down so it gives that authentic oil painting look. It just gives it some texture. And once that first coat was dry, I took some of my instant coffee and warm water and added a little bit of Mod Podge in it. I want to kind of give it that sepia look, that aged vintage look of an old oil painting. And I'm going to just brush it on with my paintbrush, doing strokes every which way. Again, that's going to give it that look of that old oil painting. So as I'm finishing this project up, I found there was a little bit too much gold showing in the ornate frame. So I'm just going over it with some of my black homemade chalk paint just to tone it down a little bit. And then I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to go back in with a baby wipe and just wipe off the top bits of that paint on all of that ornate frame. and I think we're just about done. This might be the best $3.19 that I've ever spent on a thrift store find for the way that it turned out. To do is grab some oven cleaner. I actually found this at our dollar store. It was $4, and I used this container for all 4 of these projects. I have a frame that's been decoupaged on. I have a little trinket box, a picture frame, and these candlesticks. They're all really dated looking, covered in a lot of varnish, and we're going to put this easy off oven cleaner to the test and see if it'll break through the surface of all of these projects. Of course, I'm doing this outside. You want to be in a well-ventilated area, making sure you wear a mask, glasses, and gloves. I sprayed the oven cleaner on all of these projects really liberally, let it sit for 20 minutes, and now I'm taking a scrub brush and just scrubbing at it. And as you can see, a lot of it is already lifting off. I put them all in a pail, and I'm just using my pressure washer on a low setting. You can also use a garden hose. And I let it soak for a few minutes, and now I'm going back in again with my scrub brush, and you can see how it's lifting that first layer off. And it's also soaked into that decoupaged print, and it's coming off that plaque also. Having that orange stain and that thick varnish just screams 80s. So this is really going to update these pieces. I've set these up again on the crate and the pail to give them another coat, spraying it on really liberally, and we're gonna set it aside and let it sit again for 20 more minutes. After that 20 minutes was up, we went back in with that scrub brush again and really aggressively scrubbed at all of those projects, and you can still see there's a lot of that stain and varnish that's still coming off. Also used my scraper a little bit to help it along. Okay, the first project that we're going to finish up are these candlestick holders. I was blown away. I was able to get almost everything off of these right back to the raw wood. I let it dry overnight, and now I'm just going in with a little bit of sandpaper and just cleaning up around the grooves and the edges just to smooth it out a little bit. I can't believe how well that oven cleaner broke through that really thick varnish and stain and removed it all. So here's the before. And here is the after. They look high-end. Love the way they turned out. I didn't even put anything on them because I love that raw wood look. Kind of gives me that Pier 1 kind of vibes. Put some candles in them. These are going in my house. Is this little plaque. It was a little bit more stubborn. After 3 coats of the oven cleaner, this is as far as I could get it lifted. So I went at it with a 120 grit sandpaper, and it didn't take much to sand this right back down to the raw wood. And I'm going to turn it into a sign. We're going to use our label sheet technique with polyacrylic sealer. I have a full tutorial on how to do this transfer technique, and it works really well on raw wood. We're using our polyacrylic sealer matte finish, and I'm going to put a coat on top of that piece of wood, and then we're going to lay that label sheet that I've printed on with my LaserJet printer right into that polyacrylic sealer, making sure it's centered and have it exactly where we want it. I set it aside and let it dry for a few hours, and then once it's completely dry, all you do is just remove that label sheet and you've got graphics on your project. So we've taken this plaque that had this decoupaged, probably greeting card on it, and upcycled it into this beautiful little plaque that I am going to hang in my craft room. Who doesn't love rusty hinges and an old door pull? I'm going to put this together, and this is going to be really fun. I had this old scrap piece of wood. I think I'd actually put a little bit of sand paint on it. I'm going to add some turquoise acrylic paint on, paint it over the entire top of the surface, let it dry, and then I'm going to scrape away at it and sand it, and I'm going to create this really great chippy piece of wood to make my project on. Nothing better than taking a brand new piece of wood and making it look old and chippy and vintage just with a little painting technique. I screwed the hinge and that pull onto the board, making sure the hinge was right at the edge. So I am now going to use my Gorilla Glue, and I want to make sure that hinge is not going to flap back and forth. So I'm just adding a little bit of it into that hinge so it'll stay put. Now the screws were not the same color now, so I had a little bit of acrylic paint. I dabbed it on and it actually was almost the same color. Worked perfect. Gonna dab that on, let it dry, and then I'm gonna take my engine enamel and give everything a really good coat because we want this to be really durable. So I've taken all of this crap and this is what I've turned it into. A cell phone holder. It's also great for business cards. This cabinet was given to me by a friend who was cleaning out his parents' home and didn't have a spot for it in his own and knew I was an upcycler and I could probably do something with it. So I grabbed it from him, of course, and I put it here in our home. Now I do find that it just kind of blends in. It just is too much wood on wood on wood. So I think what I'm going to do, because it fits absolutely perfect in this spot, I think I'm going to give it a little bit of an upcycle and maybe use some black chalk paint. So, got lots of work. Let's get going on this free cabinet. If you're new here, my name is Deidre from Our Upcycled Life, and I love showing you how you can transform and upcycle projects into beautiful home decor on a budget. Today I'm going to be sharing lots of great ideas and tutorials on how to turn everyday items into stunning pieces for your home. I love repurposing old furniture, especially when you can find it free or really affordable. You're going to be amazed what you can do with a little bit of creativity and some inexpensive materials. Make sure you watch through to the end for a variety of different projects that will fit any budget. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe. I got all the hardware off. I am not replacing it because I love it. It's like a hammered metal, but I am going to spray paint them all matte black. I love the way the handles turned out. You can really see that hammered texture. I'm really glad that I'm saving the hardware and just spray painting it. And I'm going to screw them all back on the door fronts. I am just going to paint this portion of the cabinet. Number one reason, I hate painting shutters. But I just think it'll be nice to have the two different tones. We'll have the black, and then I'll keep the doors this color because it actually matches the trim really well. So I'm going to empty this out and get it ready to paint. Okay, we're all ready. I'm using chalk paint. I have a homemade chalk paint that I absolutely love. It's affordable and it'll adhere to any surface, so you don't have to do a whole lot of prep to any of your pieces that you're painting. So I've mixed up some black homemade chalk paint. I'll put the link down below in the description, so if you want to make that recipe, you can for yourself. And also, I picked this sweater up the other day, $4.99, American Eagle at Value Village. What do you think? First coat's dry, so I'm now putting on the second coat. That's one of the nice things about chalk paint is it dries really quickly, so you can complete a project in a day and have 2 or 3 coats of that chalk paint dry for you. Okay, I got everything all painted and I absolutely love it. It took 2 coats of the chalk paint. It's dry. Now I'm going to put the doors on. I am absolutely in love with this cabinet, and what makes it even more fabulous is that it was free and it only took me a couple hours and a little bit of black chalk paint and it looks fabulous. And I've just put some of my thrifted finds on top. a faux plant, a little pottery dish. I love looking for pottery at the thrift store, handmade. Nice little glass container, a little collection of some pottery and some battery operated candles that I think are fantastic to add some ambiance. Added a few vintage books, and I've had these spindles in my collection for forever. I think they look nice just nestled in there. And did you know you can put art on your TV? If you go onto YouTube and search vintage art TV, they have so many fantastic channels. You can pick whatever vibe you want. Right now, winter, this would look beautiful. And it's gonna come up with a beautiful winter scene on your TV, and it's gonna alternate pictures every 10 or 15 minutes. They've got some beautiful floral ones. It's something just to play around with and see what looks nice in your setting. I just scored the cutest little table at the thrift store for only $7.99. It definitely needs some TLC, but I couldn't pass it up. And what I love most is how the top extends on both sides, giving me extra surface when needed, but it still keeps that charming, compact side. I think it's going to be perfect as a little end table next to my chair in my living room. Okay, time to give this little gem a fresh new look. Let's get upcycling. Underneath the table, there's a simple but clever mechanism, 2 wooden supports that slide out to hold up the extending side pieces. When you pull them out, the tabletop expands, giving you that extra surface space, and it's such a great design. When I first spotted it at the thrift store, I thought the top was solid wood. I didn't really look at it too closely, but it turns out it's only a laminate overlay. It does have some chips and damage, but that's an easy fix. So I'm going to start with some 120 grit sandpaper and give the top and the sides a light sanding. The key here is to go gently, because if I put too much pressure on that laminate, it could wear right through, and we definitely don't want that. Buying laminate furniture can feel intimidating, especially if you're worried about fixing damage or making it look high-end. But if you're planning to paint it, it actually is an easy transformation. The key is proper prep, light sanding to scuff up the surface, using a good paint, and using some spackling or wood filler. Just a little bit of effort, and you can take a worn out laminate piece and turn it into something beautiful for your space. I wouldn't recommend using anything rougher than a 120 grit sandpaper for this kind of project. An 80 grit would be too aggressive, especially on that laminate surface. It could tear right through the top layer and create more damage. A light sanding with a 120 grit is just enough to scuff up the surface, so when you're putting on that spackling or that wood filler, it's going to adhere properly. Now I'm just going to go in with a damp rag to wipe away all the dust from sanding. This step is important because it ensures that we have a nice clean surface for the next stage of the project. It's time to fill the spots where the laminate is missing. I'm using some spackling and a putty knife to press it firmly in those areas, making sure to fill all the little grooves. You don't want to apply it too thickly. Thin, even layers works best, and it may take a couple of coats to get that smooth finish. The goal is to blend everything seamlessly, so where the repaired spots disappear once we paint. As I was filling in the chips and cracks, I noticed the tabletop itself had a lot of grooves and texture in the wood grain that needed some smoothing out. So I used my putty knife to spread the spackling almost across the entire surface to create a nice, even finish. After letting it dry for a few hours, I'm now going back in with my 120 grit sandpaper to remove any of that extra spackling. This step is going to leave us a nice smooth surface, so we'll be ready to paint. Now the surface is all ready. I'm going to go back in with a damp rag, just water, to wipe away all the dust. And this is going to have a piece that's clean and it's ready to be painted. If you've been around here for a while, you know how much I love Bare Limousine Leather. It's hands down the most beautiful black paint I've ever used, and that's exactly what I'm going to use for the top of this table. I'm keeping the legs their natural wood color, which I think will be a really nice contrast. So right now I'm just going to brush on that first coat, making sure to get even coverage across the top. After letting the first coat dry completely for a couple hours, I'm going in with my final coat, this time using a roller. I find that rolling gives a much smoother finish compared to brushing, which can sometimes leave visible brush marks. One of the things I love about the Bare Limousine Leather is its self-leveling feature, so even if you prefer brushing, the paint evens out on its own beautifully. And just look at this black. It is so rich and so bold. I've used this paint on so many of my DIY projects and I keep coming back to it. Plus, I always buy it with an enamel finish if I'm using it on something that I want it to be durable, making it perfect for this end table. Whether someone sets down a drink or I place a plant on it, the surface is going to hold up really well. One thing I want to mention is that since I'm using an enamel finish, I don't need to apply a top coat. This paint is already durable enough to withstand daily use. However, if you're using a regular latex paint, adding a top coat after this is dried would be a great finish and give it that extra durability, especially for a piece like this end table that's going to get plenty of use. Just be sure to let that paint fully cure before painting on a top coat like a polyacrylic or a polyurethane. And here's the perfect little nook where I wanted to place the table, right beside our armchair. Now, if someone's sitting there, they'll have a spot for a cup of coffee or tea or a drink. Plus, I can add a lovely plant that will thrive in the sunshine from this window. So I'm glad I spotted this little table and had a chance to upcycle it, giving it a whole new life and making it a perfect addition to this space. We worked on was this wooden frame, and it had some really intricate cuts in it, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get that cleaned out in there. I was really surprised. It worked really well and it came up nice and clean. I'm going to turn this into a sign. I cut a piece of MDF and I've painted it with some homemade chalk paint, and we're going to do our Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method on this. Printed out these graphics on my LaserJet printer, making sure to reverse the text. This graphic's available in my Etsy store if you want to grab it. I'll have the link down below in the description and you can check that out. I've let it set for 24 hours and now I'm just taking a damp rag with some water, wetting it till you can just start to see the graphics show through, and then taking off the paper. You can peel it off if you can get it to peel, and then go back in with your fingers and rub all of the paper away until it's nice and clean. And then I'm going to seal it with some polyacrylic sealer and we're ready to put it in the frame. So here's the before with that ugly orange dated stain, and this is what we upcycled it to. Cleaned up really nice, gave it a really rustic look, and then when I added that sign in the middle, it finished it off perfectly. old rusty stuff, always dragging it home, but now my stash is getting too big, so I'm going to put some DIYs together with some of the stuff that I've gathered along the way. And before I get started, I like to seal everything with my matte polyacrylic sealer. To hold everything together, I'm using my E6000 and a little bit of hot glue from my glue gun to keep it all solid and bonded really well. Some have said they don't like to use the E6000 and the hot glue together, that it doesn't work really well. I've never had any issues, so I always use it together because then I can move it around without worrying of it tipping over before it really bonds together. This old hinge is so beautiful. The rusted patina on it is fantastic, and I'm going to add it to the front of that rusty loaf pan. This video is going to show you that you can take any type of junk, anything that you would think would just be garbage, and turn it into something beautiful. All of this stuff was discarded, and when I have it all put together, it's so gorgeous, and it would look beautiful in an old farmhouse kitchen or living room to display maybe a plant or some little knickknacks. So here's my before of all of my crap, and here is what I've created. I found this beautiful blue cabinet at an estate sale, and the moment I saw it, I knew it had to come home with me. It has the most gorgeous little scroll details and a cute little cubby that opens up for storage. And the best part is it's not very deep, so you can tuck it perfectly into a small little corner. It's just one of those pieces that has so much character, and I love that. Now the paint is definitely uneven. One side has a lot more coverage than the other, and in some areas it's really chippy and worn. I thought I would smooth it out a bit, so I grabbed my sander and I got to work, but wow, this paint is stubborn. It is not budging. I have no idea what kind it is, but it is not budging. Maybe it's a milk paint. Either way, instead of fighting it, I've decided just to knock down the rough spots and embrace this chippy, worn look. Honestly, it's just a gorgeous piece as it is, and I think keeping it that way is the way to go right now. As you can see, even as I stand back, the sander really isn't taking much off. I'm using some 120 grit. I did try some 80 grit and it didn't really do much either. So now, honestly, I thought the paint was going to come off a lot easier. I was expecting to sand it right down without much effort, but that's definitely not going to happen. I really didn't want to get into stripping it because it's such a big mess. So my plan was just to smooth it out with some sanding, but at this point, that's just not going to happen. So we're embracing the blue. It's a gorgeous color anyways, and instead of fighting it, I'm just going to focus on knocking down those high spots and rough edges to give it a more finished look. It's just one layer of paint directly on the bare wood, which makes me think that this was just a quick paint job at some point. I did a lead paint test just to be safe, and thankfully it's all good, no lead. But as I'm sanding, it's coming off in like a fine chalky dust, which really has me leaning towards being an old milk paint. It's probably been on there for years. If you have any idea of what type of paint this might be, let me know down in the comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. This side of the cabinet is almost completely covered in blue paint. There's barely any chipping at all. And just like the rest, it's not budging no matter how much I sand, so we're rolling with it. One side will have the solid blue look, and the other side's gonna have a naturally worn, distressed feel. It's definitely turning into a piece with tons of rustic vintage charm, and I love how it's taking on that perfectly imperfect farmhouse vibe. The mix of chippy paint and the natural wood gives it so much character. And here's the back, definitely a homemade piece, probably built from scrap wood at some point. And you can see all the little imperfections that make it so unique. I've got it all sanded down and it's feeling nice and smooth. So next I'm gonna take some hot soapy water and give it a good wipe down to remove all the dust and debris. Once it's clean and dry, we're gonna seal it up to lock in that gorgeous rustic farmhouse charm. We're sealing this up with a polyacrylic sealer in a clear semi-gloss finish. I love using polyacrylic because it gives it a nice durable finish without yellowing over time. It'll protect the wood while keeping it that rustic farmhouse vibe. Plus the slight sheen is really going to bring out the character and all that chippy blue paint. Now I'm just going to set it aside and let it dry completely. I've tucked it into a cozy corner in my kitchen, styled it, and I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. Honestly, I'm kind of glad I couldn't get the blue paint off. It adds so much more character and makes this piece feel truly unique. It doesn't feel like that something has been mass produced from a big box store. It has that perfectly imperfect rustic farmhouse charm. I've filled the shelves with little trinkets and cookbooks and things that I have collected along the way. And as for that fold down shelf, James has already claimed it. It's now packed with paperwork, so we're not going to be peeking inside there anytime soon. It's a mess, but honestly, I'm just so happy with how this piece turned out. I'm embracing the blue. It's a perfect blend of rustic farmhouse charm, and I just love how it fills this little corner in space and makes it feel homey and special. You may have noticed the barn board signs on the wall beside the hutch. These are some of my favorites. I made them using scrap barn board and the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer technique. If you haven't tried this method yet, it's a fun and easy way to create unique looking signs. I'll link a tutorial down below if you're curious to give it a try. If you're interested, we're offering a 7-day free trial, so you can sign up, explore all the graphics, and download as many as you like for free, no strings attached, and you can cancel anytime. We're constantly adding new designs, so I hope you'll give it a try and see what you think. And if you're just browsing, you can also find these graphics available individually in my Etsy store. Next project, I had an old rusty horseshoe and this block of wood. The wood was already painted with some black homemade chalk paint, so I'm putting some white homemade chalk paint on top. We're going to set it aside and let it dry, and then once it dries, I'm going to really aggressively sand it. And then I printed off this graphic that I made. This is perfect for the horse lovers. I'm going to use my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method, putting a light coat of the Mod Podge all over that graphic that I printed off on my LaserJet printer, making sure to reverse the text. This is available in my Etsy store if you want to grab this graphic and make a project like this for yourself. I'll put the link down below in the description. I'm going to place it exactly where I want it, making sure I'm getting out all of the bubbles and wrinkles, and then we're going to set it aside until tomorrow. It's the next day and I've dampened the paper with a little bit of water, rubbing it off all the paper, and then I'm going to seal it up with some water-based polyacrylic sealer. If you don't have any polyacrylic sealer, you can also seal up your signs with some Mod Podge. Went into my stash, I found some nails, and I'm just going to nail that horseshoe right onto that sign. And this is the before, and this is what I created. Whole bunch of rusty nails. I don't know why I always keep piles of these. I keep them in a glass jar because I know eventually I'm gonna get around to making a project with them. Today's the day. I've just gathered a whole bunch that are all the same size, and I had a little glass jar that I painted with some white chalk paint, and I'm just gonna hot glue them all the way around that whole jar. I was so happy to use up a bunch of these and create something beautiful out of it. So this is the before, and this is what I created. Who doesn't? I found this beautiful oil painting at the thrift store tucked way back in a corner, and the price tag was only $7.99. I was ecstatic and couldn't get to the cash fast enough. I also discovered this awesome kit on Amazon with different size felt pads, originally meant to protect your floors, but they also work wonders for protecting your walls too. I like to stick one in each corner of the frame before hanging it. That way, if it shifts or rubs against the wall, it won't leave any marks or damages. These pads are perfect for protecting your walls under oil paintings or photos. And trust me, they're also a lifesaver under furniture to prevent floor scratches. I'll drop the link to this set I've got in the description. They're super affordable and really useful. I hope you've enjoyed today's hacks, and I'd love to hear which one was your favorite, so drop a comment below. I've been on the hunt for the perfect buffet or hutch to turn into a coffee station, and when I spotted this gem at the thrift store for $40, I knew it was coming home with me. It's definitely giving some 80s vibes, but it has so much potential and tons of storage, so I can't wait to upcycle it and give it a whole new life. The back panel is a little loose. The staples have come undone, but that's an easy fix. Structurally though, it's in great shape. It has these funky wine glass holders that we might repurpose. I don't think I'm going to leave those on, but here's the challenge. I want it to fit my Keurig underneath, and this molding is in the way, keeping the lid from opening all the way up. So we might need to remove this piece of wood too. Lots of ideas brewing. The drawers all work perfectly and offer tons of storage. They just need a good cleaning. One of them even has a removable utensil holder, which is great for silverware, but I might repurpose it into something else. And the best part, it's solid wood, making it perfect for upcycling into a high quality coffee bar. The glass doors are really pretty and the hinges work perfectly, but I'm not a fan of seeing all the clutter inside, so we might have to come up with a solution for that too. It's got its fair share of dings and scratches, but that doesn't bother me. I can easily fix those up when we paint. First up, we're removing that front piece of wood so that Keurig lid can open fully. It was just tacked in place, so cutting it out was super easy and it just popped right off. We just had to be careful that we weren't cutting into the wood above it. Using an adjustable wrench, we carefully wiggled the piece back and forth, and it was only held in with a couple of screws. As you can see, I had my husband help me with this part. We're removing the screws and also taking off those end pieces, which were just notched in. We'll fill those spots with wood filler later for a seamless finish, and we'll get rid of these little screws that are hanging down. Now that we've completely removed that top piece, it already looks so much better. But I'm not loving the full panel across the back. I think I'd rather have that area behind the Keurig open to the wall. So we're going to score along the back and then remove the panel and then use a skill saw to cut it in half so only the portion covers the top. Next, we're removing the front screws and they popped right out just with a pair of pliers, super easy. Next, we use the skill saw to cut straight along our scored line, removing that lower portion of that back panel. This way, the area behind the cupboards will still have backing, but the bottom section of the hutch will be open. I think this will make the space feel more open and airy instead of dark and closed off. Now that it's cut, I just have to show you how much better it looks with the backing on the top and the bottom section left open. I absolutely love how it brightens it up and opens up that space. When we removed the side panels, we found a slot where it fits in, and instead of filling it in with wood filler, we're going to cut it off and place it back in the slot with some wood glue and then sand it down smooth. I think this will be an easier, cleaner solution than filling it with wood filler. I'm using Gorilla wood glue to coat the piece we cut off, and then I'm going to carefully place it back in that slot and tap it in with a rubber mallet. We'll get it as flush as possible, let it dry, and then we'll finish it off with my sander to clean it up. Next, I'm removing all of the hardware. I don't think I'll be using it for this project since I have something else in mind, but I'm definitely holding on to these. They'll go in my stash for a future project. Next, I'm tackling this piece of wood meant for holding wine glasses. I'm not a fan of it, but I have an idea. I want to keep the shelf, but I'll cover up the wine glass holder section. I'll cut a piece of wood that was from the front of that cabinet to fit flush on the front, and then use some wood filler to fill in the holes where the glasses would have hung. That way we're keeping the shelf without using it for wine glasses. I'm going to measure the length we need to cut off the piece of trim to fit perfectly into the cubby on the shelf. Then we're going to use a skill saw to trim off the ends, and as you can see, it fits right in there just right, exactly what I had in mind. Next, I'm going to add some wood glue to the front of that piece of trim, making sure it's evenly spread, and then I'm going to carefully place it into position, ensuring it's perfectly centered. Once I've got it right, I'm going to grab my air nailer and I'm going to carefully tack it in place, making sure it's securely attached and exactly where I want it. Now we're going to fill in those wine glass holder slots with wood filler. I'm going to use my putty knife to carefully fill them up, making sure not to apply it too thick, just a nice even coat. It might take a couple coats to fill them right up, so I'm going to press in the filler with my knife, let it dry, and then add more until they're completely filled. I'm going to take my time to ensure this step is done properly because I want to make sure I have a nice smooth, clean finish. Now I'm going to fill in all those little holes left by the knobs since I'm not going to keep them in their original spots. I want the surface to be nice and smooth before we paint, so I'll make sure to get them fully covered for a nice finish. As I was getting ready to clean the cabinet and pull out the drawers, I stumbled upon some hidden treasures in there. I found a placemat, an old 1982 newspaper flyer, which confirms the pieces from the 1980s, a greeting card, and even a gift bag. Someone had tucked away some Christmas cards and a bit of personal paperwork, or they've fallen down in behind the drawer. I'm going to be disregarding all of that personal paperwork, but it's always a fun surprise to see what treasures you're going to be finding hiding back in some of that secondhand furniture. I'm going to hang on to this flyer because it's a fascinating snapshot of 1980s pricing. It's got the price of vehicles, tune-ups, oil changes, mechanic services. It's such a cool throwback, and I think it's going to make a perfect addition to one of my junk journals. I'm definitely going to be keeping this. Next up, I'm removing all the hinges and dismantling the doors so we can take the entire cabinet outside. We're going to sand off that top layer of varnish or shellac, starting with a 180 grit sandpaper to work over the whole piece. That was a lot of work, but definitely worth it. I only scuff sanded the top coat to give the new paint a solid surface to bond with. Now I'm going to tackle all of these scratches and dents. I'm going to apply wood filler and smooth them all out to create a nice smooth finish. Once I got started, I was amazed by the number of scratches and dents. It was clear somebody really went to town on this piece. It's going to take a bit of time and patience, but this step is really crucial to make sure that when we paint, it's going to look flawless. So I'm going to take my time. While it's drying, I'm going to tackle the cleaning, scrubbing down the doors and drawers to get rid of all of the dust and dirt and grime. I got a bucket of hot soapy water ready, and I'm giving everything a thorough scrub to ensure it's nice and clean. The wood filler has dried on the top, and now it's time to sand it smooth. I'm going to use a 220 grit sandpaper to get a nice even finish. I picked out this paint for the cabinet since it's going to be a high-use coffee bar and I wanted something durable. This is Bear's melamine finish in limousine leather, the perfect deep black if you're looking for a rich, bold color. I'm rolling on the first coat and then I'm going to go in with a brush to get in all the corners and underneath where the roller can't reach. This paint is in a satin finish and it's self-leveling, so once it dries, it gives a smooth, professional look. Plus the melamine finish makes it super durable, perfect for a space that's going to see a lot of action. I grabbed it from Home Depot and it's always my go-to brand. While I'm painting this, I keep thinking, why would I buy a brand new coffee bar when I could thrift something way cooler for a fraction of the price? This cabinet is solid, has way more character than anything from a big box store, and just needed a little love. Plus, upcycling keeps furniture out of the landfill, so it's a win-win. A fresh coat of paint, a few simple tweaks, and this is going to be a perfect coffee bar. Everything has 3 coats on it and it's drying beautifully. I decided to leave the inside of the top unpainted. I actually love the contrast of the natural wood against the black. And I also painted the back panel that's going to go behind the cupboards, and now it's ready to be tacked on. We're in the final stretch and this is all coming together. I decided to keep the hinges as they are instead of spray painting them, and honestly, I love how they pop against the black. Now I'm just putting them back on all the doors and getting everything ready to hang. I've always struggled to find the perfect black, but this limousine leather has become my go-to. I've used it on several projects now, and I love how rich and deep the color is. If you're looking for that perfect black, I'll put the paint chip card right here. I've even used this shade on all the interior doors in our home, and it turns out absolutely gorgeous. Okay, what do you think so far? The hinges look amazing, and I'm so glad I kept them as they are. The paint dried super smooth with a nice durable finish. I actually let it sit for 3 days before putting the doors back on, just to make sure it had fully cured. And here's a quick tip. When you're painting furniture, always make sure you let each coat dry completely as it's stated on the can before adding the next one. That's key to getting that smooth professional finish. And don't rush the curing time. I know it's tempting to put everything back right away, but letting it sit for a few days ensures that the paint really bonds and stays durable. Trust me, it makes all the difference in the long run. I'm so glad I removed that bottom scalloped piece and covered up those wine glass holders. It really gives the cabinet a much more modern look now. Remember how I mentioned I don't love seeing through the glass? It tends to create that cluttered look that just doesn't vibe with the clean modern feel I'm going for. So I'm going to clean up the glass panels, and I'm going to use a product called Mirror Effect Spray. It transforms glass into vintage style mirror, and it works like a charm. I've used it on a few other projects, and I've been really happy with the results, and it's super easy to use. We're going to mix 50-50 solution of water and vinegar and then spray it on the glass. Next, apply that Mirror Effect spray over top, let it sit for about a minute, and then gently dab it with a paper towel. You want to repeat this process 2 or 3 times to get the depth of the mirror effect that you want. For these glass panes, I applied 3 coats of the Mirror Effect spray. You can easily check the progress by holding the glass up and looking at the reflection. If it's not quite enough mirrored, then just add another layer. I found that 3 layers gives the product the perfect amount of reflection and vintage charm. Now that we've got the Mirror Effect spray applied in 3 layers, it's time to give it that mirror look. I'm using a black spray paint for this step. You want to apply a light, even coat over both panes of the glass until they're fully covered. This dark layer is going to create that reflective surface we're aiming for transforming that glass into that beautiful vintage styled mirror. So here's the hardware I picked for the cabinet, and I'm seriously in love with them. I found them on Amazon. I'll put the link down below in the description. And I also got some shelf liner that I'm going to put in the bottom of the drawers. This floral print is beautiful, and this is just peel and stick wallpaper that will stick really well, and it'll make it easier to wipe out the bottom of the drawers, especially when it's going to be a coffee bar. Lining the inside of your drawers when you're upcycling a cabinet or a dresser is always a game changer. It really finishes off the piece and gives it more of a high-end feel. Plus, it's really easy to install. You just have to cut it to size, use an X-Acto knife to trim the edges for a clean, crisp look. And there's so many peel and stick wallpapers and shelf liners out there, especially on Amazon, that you can use to match your projects perfectly. It's all about those little details that make such a big impact on anything that you're upcycling. And here it is, all set up and ready for coffee. I love how this piece came together, from the rich black finish to the mirrored glass and those little details that make it feel so special. It's a perfect mix of modern and vintage, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. Seeing it all styled and ready to use makes all of the hard work totally worth it. Let me know what you think. Would you have made the same changes, or would you have done something different? Next upcycling project was this candlestick wall holder. I had some black spray paint. I just took it outside. I gave it a coat of the black spray paint, and I had this plaque that I found at the thrift store. It's originally from the dollar store. I think it was $1. And I'm going to decoupage a piece of my scrapbooking paper on top of that. Now, when I find I have thick paper that I want to decoupage with, it doesn't lay as nice. So I have this little hack of thinning out your paper before you decoupage. So I'm just laying packing tape on the back of that paper, taking off that extra layer, and it'll take your scrapbooking paper down to almost a napkin feel. So I'm just going to put some Mod Podge matte all over this plaque, and then we're going to lay that piece of scrapbooking paper that I've made thinner with the packing tape. And it fit best on an angle, so I wanted to make sure that I had it exactly where I want it, press it down into that Mod Podge, making sure that it's adhered really well, pressing right around the edges, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry completely. Okay, that's completely dried. I've just got a little piece of sandpaper and I'm just sanding all around the edges, and it's going to leave a little bit of a distressed edge and clean off all of that extra scrapbooking paper. If you're enjoying my content, take a moment right now and hit the like button. Your support means the world to me, and it helps my channel reach more people who will enjoy my videos, and with your help I can continue to create fun and creative upcycles and turning trash into treasures. And I just want to thank you for being a part of my YouTube journey here on my channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Now that I have all that extra scrapbooking paper sanded away, I sealed it up with some polyacrylic sealer. I added the candlestick holder onto it and one of the candles from that bag that I picked up at the thrift store. What do you think? I really like it, and I think it pulled together really nice. Okay, next upcycle. This mirror was a disaster. It looks like somebody decided to paint over the mirror. So I'm just taking my scraper. I'm being really careful not to scratch the mirror underneath, but it was coming off really easy. So scraping away, taking my time, and I think I'm going to be able to upcycle this really easy. Hi guys! And now that I have all of that paint, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of sandpaper. This is an 80 grit, and I'm just going to go over and distress any of the high edges. This is all that this needed. It just needed to have the mirror cleaned up and the outside kind of distressed a little bit. And easy thrift store find that I think upcycled beautifully. Upcycling project involves turning a wooden stand, possibly used for plants, into a basic stool. To begin with, I'm going to measure the legs and make them slightly shorter, so they're going to be more of a better length to sit on. After measuring, I'm going to use my jigsaw to cut the legs and ensure that they're all the same length. I was really excited when I had a friend show up with this plant stand because I visioned a stool right away. I'm also going to save those ends that I've cut off because I can put those to use in another project. The paint on this stand almost feels like it might have been enamel based. I probably could have used a paint stripper, but I felt like I wanted to spend a whole bunch of time sanding today. So I put on my 80 grit sandpaper and went to work, and it took a lot of sanding, but I love the results. I see stools like this with really high price tags at high-end stores, so I'm really excited that I'm able to recreate this from a thrift store find for a fraction of the price. To achieve a weathered and aged appearance, I'm going to be using a variety of different tools, such as a chain, hammer, putty knife, some pliers to distress that wooden surface. By intentionally adding these dings and dents and worn corners, I'm aiming to create a farmhouse-like aesthetic that suggests that the piece has been around for over a century. I'm also going to use my utility knife to cut chunks out of the wood here. And while this process may not be for the faint of heart, I assure you the end result's going to be worth it. Once I achieved all of that desired texture, I'm going to go over the wood with an 80 grit sander to smoothen out all those notches, chunks, and preserve that aged look. After completing all the sanding, it's time to apply some wax for that finishing touch. Now here's a little twist. I'm going to use some of my leftover shoe polish from another project as the top coat for this stool. I have some black and clear shoe polish, and I'm going to mix them together to create a shade that's not overly dark. I'm going to apply that shoe wax, and it's going to provide a durable permanent finish on this stool. As I rub it in, all the wax is going to seep into those notches and dings, and it's going to accentuate them, adding that even more to that aged look. It's the perfect final touch. And if you don't have shoe polish, don't worry, you can use your regular finishing wax to achieve the same results. Personally, I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. This stool is finding a special place in my kitchen, right where it belongs. First up is these candlestick holders. We're gonna tint these candlestick holders. This is such a fun technique. I have a full tutorial. I'll put the link down below in the description if you want all the measurements and see how to do this. It's basically, I mixed together a recipe of homemade Mod Podge, adding some food coloring, and I'm doing a brown color because I want these to look like that old antique amber. And I'm putting one coat on each of these candlesticks, and then I'm gonna let it dry. I'm wearing gloves because the food coloring will stain your hands, and I don't wanna have that happen. Speeding up the process, I'm using my heat gun to dry each coat in between, and I'm putting 2 coats on with a brush. Now I've got 2 coats of that stain on this glass. The third coat, I like to use a sponge, and I'm just gonna sponge all around. It kind of gives a vintage glass look. I kind of like the look of the little air bubbles in it. Once I have both of them covered, I'm gonna set them aside and let them dry. Now I didn't do the back side, I only did the top. And this is not permanent. This will be able to be washed off with some hot soapy water. So you can change it up for the season. I picked up this bag of candles at the thrift store. I love the beeswax ones that I found in there and added them to the candlestick holders. What do you think? I absolutely love them, and this technique is so easy. This will be perfect for right now, and then maybe closer to Easter, I can switch these up and do it in a pink. So many possibilities. Have you ever struggled to get the wire on the back of your frame onto a screw on the wall? It can be such a headache. Well, here's a super fun and easy hack that's going to save you all of that frustration. This is a beautiful original oil painting I found at the thrift store, and it has a wire on the back. So you're going to go to your kitchen utensil drawer and you are going to grab a fork. Yeah, you heard me, grab a fork, and you're going to slide it onto the screw in the wall, and it's going to act as a perfect little guide for your picture wire. Now you can easily slip the wire right onto the screw without any hassle. How clever is that? I'm always on the lookout for original oil paintings at the thrift store, and when I find one, I'm so thrilled, especially when it's this easy to hang. After hanging all of your pictures or photos, always go back with a level and make sure the bubble is centered on your frame. You'd be surprised how many times what looks straight to your eye is actually off a little. Even the ones I hung earlier, which I thought were perfectly level, needed a little tweak. So take a moment to adjust and get that bubble centered and make sure your frames look spot on the wall. I'm rummaging through my junk drawer in search of 4 old doorknobs. I have this wonderful idea to repurpose them along with a piece of salvaged wood into a fun DIY coat rack. Interestingly, these doorknobs were given to me by a friend who knew I could create something beautiful with them. So here's my take on it. To start, I'm sanding down that salvaged wood using a 120 grit sandpaper to remove all of that outdated varnish. I always ask my friends to save unique items instead of throwing them away. They know I love upcycling and transforming discarded items into something beautiful, and it's my way of reducing waste and avoiding filling up landfills. Instead of burning or wasting these items, I'm giving them a new life and purpose. Did you know you can create a cost-effective wood stain by just mixing instant coffee with hot water? It's a simple solution that works wonders for staining your DIY projects. Try it out and you might be amazed by the results. To attach the doorknobs to the piece of wood, I'm going to be using a product called JB Weld Steel Stick. It's a putty that you mix together, and once it hardens, it provides a secure bond. I also have double-ended screws that are going to fit perfectly into the doorknobs. Here's how it works. I'm going to quickly mold that steel stick, ensuring it's a consistent color, and blend it in and mixed well. Then you're going to insert it into the bottom opening on that doorknob. After that, I'll place the screw into the putty, and as it dries, the putty will act like cement, permanently fixing that screw to the doorknob. And this is going to allow us to securely attach those doorknobs to that salvaged piece of wood. point, I enlisted the help of my husband because, well, let's just say patience and I aren't best friends, especially when it comes to measurements. With his guidance, we marked the 4 spots where each doorknob was going to be placed on the wood, and then I made a small test pilot hole to ensure that it was going to screw in easy. Now, all that's left is to screw in those doorknobs and attach them securely to the wood. Before proceeding, I let these doorknobs sit overnight to make sure that they were dry fully before we screwed them in. Important to remember that everything in this project was obtained for free. The salvage wood was discovered in a pile of discarded pieces, and the doorknobs were generously given to me by a friend. These doorknobs are truly stunning with their unique weathering and patina. I'm grateful that I can bring these materials together and transform what would otherwise have been waste into something truly beautiful. This coat rack is headed to my cabin. It's going to be a perfect addition, and it's going to complement that decor wonderfully. This poor old little step stool or step ladder is in really rough shape. It's kind of crooked. The legs have kind of been bent a little bit, but I have a fantastic idea of how to upcycle this. I'm going to take everything apart and give it a really good cleaning. Scrape all the loose paint off of it, give it a little sanding, and see if I can straighten up the legs a little bit. I'm not sure if I can, but look at that beautiful red paint that's on the bottom of this. I'm going to try to recreate that red, and I had this red in my cabinet and it matched pretty good. So I'm going to paint all of those wooden steps with the red paint. For the frame of this step ladder, I had this turquoise blue spray paint, which I absolutely love. I think it's going to look beautiful with the red, so I gave everything a really good coat of the blue. Everything's completely dry, and we're going to put it all back together. And here's how I upcycled it. A beautiful spot to keep some of my potted plants. I never pass them up if I find them because they can be upcycled into such cute kitchen decor. I sprayed it with some matte black chalk paint, and then I did the white roller part in white chalk paint, and then I made the graphic bake. It looked really cute on this rolling pin. Used my Mod Podge and put the Mod Podge on, let it sit for 24 hours. Then I wet it down, rubbed off the graphic, added a really cute little ribbon to it that finished it off perfect. And these actually sell really well too. So if you see them, grab them if you're a reseller. And here's another way that I had another rolling pin that I upcycled. I painted the handles with some red acrylic paint. I like to use a nice bright color that you would find in a farmhouse kitchen. Let them dry really well. And I had this wrapping paper that had vintage advertising on it. I'm just going to decoupage it onto the middle of that rolling pin. Going to use my Mod Podge mat and just put a liberal coat over the rolling pin part. But when you want your paper to be a little bit more pliable when you're going to decoupage with it, I just like to spray it with a little bit of water. It just helps it lay flat and decoupage nicer. I just do it in little sections, doing a little bit underneath and then a little bit on top. And when it's all done, I'll set it aside, I'll let it dry. And that's all there is to this project. And like I said before, these little rolling pins sell really well if you're a reseller. Thrift stores often have an overwhelming number of picture frames, and it can be a challenge to find the perfect one. But taking the time to sort through them is worth it. Recently, I found a beautiful wooden frame that caught my eye. Although I didn't like the print in the middle, I decided to upcycle it. First, I used a scuff pad to remove any imperfections that were on the wood, giving it that rustic look. And then I printed a graphic from my Etsy store on my laser printer. I'm going to give it a vintage touch, and I think it's going to blend better with the frame with a coffee stain. I love the primitive farmhouse style, but feel free to add your own twist on any of these techniques that suits your decor. Coffee staining is a simple way to give plain paper a rustic vintage look. All you need is some instant coffee and some warm water and a sponge. Just dab the mixture all over the print, ensuring that it covers the paper evenly. And then I like to use a heat gun because it dries it really quick and we can get crafting faster. This method is perfect for creating a fast, charming, coffee stained effect on all of your papers, and it's going to work great for this project. I'm going to attach that print with some Mod Podge. I've got my Mod Podge mat and I'm just spreading it out over top of that print that was there before. Now I couldn't pull it out. It had been glued down previously, so it's going to stay put. I'm not going to make a mess trying to rip it out, and I'm just going to glue right on top of it. And if you don't have any Mod Podge in your stash, you can make some homemade Mod Podge. I have a fantastic recipe for that. I'll put the link down below in the description, or you can just use any type of crafting glue. And then to finish it off, I want to seal it up again with that Mod Podge mat. And I'm kind of stippling it on because it gives that old look to the paper, like an old oil painting. What a fantastic thrift store find at such a reasonable price. I might have overlooked it if I hadn't caught my eye amongst all of the sea of frames. So take your time, look through the frames, and you might be surprised what you find. I love this one. What do you think? I came across these wooden pieces at a yard sale actually, and I think they were probably meant for a wooden crate. It would be the end pieces that you hung onto. However, I immediately saw the potential for them to be transformed into cutting boards, and since my cutting boards sell really well, I grabbed them all. I'm going to start by coffee staining them, which I love because it's affordable and easy to mix up. And then I'm going to make them food grade and safe for kitchen use. I'm going to use some butcher block oil. It's important to thoroughly clean and sand them before applying the coffee stain, and then once they're sealed with that butcher block oil, people can confidently use them in their kitchen if they decide to purchase them. So don't forget to check the tool section at the thrift store for scrap wood pieces like this, or when you're out yard sailing. You might find some hidden gems. These wooden scraps won't last long because they have great potential for various DIY projects, so keep an eye out for these as they tend to sell really. I stumbled upon poor little Josh's toolbox tucked away in the back corner of the thrift store surrounded by tools. It immediately caught my attention and I knew I had to bring it home. However, I had to give it a personal touch and make it fit my decor. So I grabbed my 80 grit sandpaper and I gently sanded that entire toolbox to remove all of the lettering. After sanding down all that lettering, I rummaged through my paint stash and I found a red paint that actually matched almost perfectly with the existing color on the toolbox. I felt like it was fate, as if the project was meant to be. I applied a light coat of that paint all over the toolbox to blend everything together seamlessly. While thrift store shopping, remember to pay attention to the items that may seem outdated or easily overlooked. This little toolbox had likely been sitting there for quite a while, just waiting for someone to give it some love. With just a little bit of paint, some sanding, I transformed it beautifully. It's amazing what a small effort can do to breathe new life into neglected items. Instead of using this toolbox as intended, I'm going to give it a twist and turn it into a towel holder. I'm going to attach some sawtooth hangers to the back and making sure that they're even and level, ensuring that they're positioned just right. And with a few screws, the hangers are going to be securely in place. Chair on the side of the road, and while definitely it's in rough shape, I can see the potential right away. The seat is beyond saving, but the structure and the bones of the chair are still solid, and I absolutely love that chippy white paint. It's perfect for the project that I have in mind. It's going to take a little bit of work, but I'm excited to bring this piece back to life and save it out of the landfill. I always hate seeing chairs get tossed out when they're still usable, so whenever I spot one, I try and grab it. if I've got room or if it's something I can upcycle and sell. But honestly, how many chairs do you really need? This one though, I know I'm going to keep. The wooden seat was just held on by some tacks, so I'm going to carefully remove each one and take the seat off and get started on this project. The top of the chair was definitely weathered, and as I started removing it, it didn't come off in one clean piece. It's just kind of just broke apart. But the good thing was it wasn't glued on, so it made it easier to work with. I just had to get under those little tacks and pop them out one by one. It definitely took some patience, but honestly, that's what I love about upcycling, being able to save something that otherwise would have just been tossed out and sent to the dump, burnt, or crushed. It's so rewarding to find a piece and just give it that second life, even if it does take a little bit of patience and time to create it. Okay, considering this was found on the side of the road, it definitely needed some cleaning. I got all the tacks pulled out and the wood taken off, so now I'm going to spray it with some cleaner and give it a good scrub to freshen it up. By the way, is anyone else like me and always seeming to drag home chairs? Let me know if you're guilty of this too. Now it's time to create a new seat pad for the chair. We need to make sure it's the perfect fit. To do that, I'm going to make a template using a piece of cardboard. I'll carefully place that cardboard on the seat of the chair and then flip it over to trace the outline of the seat. This way I'll get an exact measurement of the space that I need to fill. Once the template is ready, I can use it as a guide to cut out the piece of wood that's going to fit perfectly on top of the chair. It's a pretty simple step, but it's important to get it right so everything fits snugly and looks polished when we're done. Since we measured the inside diameter of the chair, we need to make sure our template is slightly larger to ensure that that pad is going to fit nicely on the top and not follow through. I'm going to add about 1 inch all the way around the template before we cut it out. I'm going to cut a piece of wood to sit on top of this, so we want to make sure that it's going to sit on the top and not fall through that hole. I'm going to carefully measure around the template to make sure the dimensions are spot on, and then I'm going to trace that shape onto the wood and cut it out. Great, now that we have the template all done and it fits perfectly on top of that chair, it's just going to sit on top with enough of a lip overhanging to sit securely without slipping through that hole. This is going to make it strong and sturdy. So for the chair pad, instead of using foam and fabric, I decided to go with a piece of wood. And I actually found this huge chunk of wood on the side of the road for free. It used to be a kitchen table and I knew I could repurpose it, so I brought it home. It's solid wood, and we all know that wood can be pretty pricey, so exactly why I loaded it into my truck. Now I'm going to take my template and place it on top of that piece of wood I rescued. I'm going to carefully trace around it, making sure everything is lined up and neat, and that way I'm going to have a really nice, precise cut from that kitchen table wood to ensure that it's going to turn into a beautiful chair pad. Now that everything's traced out, I'm going to grab my jigsaw and I'm going to carefully cut out that chair pad from the wood. Taking my time with this step to make sure I get a nice clean cut so it's going to look nice on that chair. Now let's see how I did with measuring this chair pad, and honestly, I think I did a pretty good job. It fits really well on the chair, it's nice and sturdy, definitely an upgrade from what it was before. I'm happy with it so far. Now it's time to sand this down, and I'm going to be aggressively sanding it with an 80 grit sandpaper. I don't want this to look like a brand new piece of wood. I want it to feel like it's always been part of the chair. So I'm focusing on rounding out the edges and softening any sharp lines and giving it that naturally worn look, like someone's been sitting in it for years. This chair pad turned out amazing, and it's hard to believe it started as a rescued kitchen tabletop from the side of the road. It's got so much character, and I love how it blends in with that original chair. The mix of the chippy white paint and the worn wood gives it that perfect vintage farmhouse feel I'm trying to achieve. I'm not painting this chair pad. I'm going to be using Poly Shades, which is a stain and polyacrylic sealer all in one. That means no extra steps, just one simple application. I'm going to take a small cloth, I'm going to rub it on and let the wood soak it up, and we're going to see all of that beautiful wood grain come to life. Now it's time to attach that chair pad to the chair. I'm using my brad nailer to secure it in place, making sure it's nice and sturdy so it's not going to shift around. If you don't have a brad nailer, don't worry, wood glue and clamps would probably work just as well. You could even try some E6000 with some clamps to hold it in place while it dries. There's lots of ways to make this project work if you wanted to try it yourself. And there you have it, another chair saved from the landfill and given a whole new life. I was able to upcycle it into something beautiful and functional as a piece of my own home decor. I'm planning on using it as a plant stand, but it's definitely sturdy enough to be used at a kitchen table or a dining room table if we ever need an extra seat. The pop of green against that chippy white paint paired with a natural wood pad makes this piece stand out, and I love how this upcycle turned out. Let me show you a great way to revamp those old dated wicker baskets that you often find in the thrift store. They're quite common but don't always match today's styles, especially with that orange or dark stain. The handles are another issue, not quite appealing. However, removing them with a simple pair of pliers or snips is really easy. Usually the handles on wicker baskets are just pushed into place and not tightly woven in, so removing them is really easy. Next, grab a large Rubbermaid tote and fill it with warm water and add some bleach. And you can just adjust this to how much you want to bleach out your wicker baskets. Submerge them into the mixture, ensuring that they stay in place by adding a rock or something heavy, and then set them aside and let them soak overnight to work their magic. Bleaching the wicker baskets lightens the color as intended. However, the effectiveness may vary depending on the basket's material. This square basket, it responded really well. Well, this other red one, it's a really strong color to remove. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but certainly worth a try. Now that the basket no longer has a dated appearance, I can fill it up with some of my other DIY projects, and I think it looks absolutely fabulous. Was this little glass plate. I actually think I found out afterwards that it might have been off of a butter dish. I spray painted it with some matte black spray paint. When that was dry, I went over it with some white chalk paint. I always like to layer my colors, so if I sand it down, the black will peek through. And then I put on a second coat, and then I took the edge of my scissors and I just scraped off those couple top layers of that white chalk paint so the black would peek through, and it gave it a really chippy rustic look. I sized up and printed off on my LaserJet printer the word sparkle. I thought this would make a really cute little trinket dish. Used my Mod Podge mat to apply it onto the dish. I let it sit for 24 hours, then rubbed off the paper, and the graphics were left on that cute little dish. I thought it would be perfect for earrings or necklace to put in the bedroom. I always find these little pieces of glassware really cheap too. So if you just use your imagination and you just can kind of create some little pieces with it, they're so original and they're so beautiful. I left the back just plain glass, and then I sealed it all up with some polyacrylic sealer. Use up a whole bunch of scrap stuff that I've had in my shed forever. An old drawer, a teapot with a missing lid, and a door handle. I'm going to take the handle off the drawer that was there already, and I'm going to paint the drawer with some of my crackle paint using the Elmer's glue. I'm going to spread that glue all over that drawer, and then we're going to paint some chalk paint on top of it. And as it dries, you're going to see some wonderful cracks show up all throughout the paint. Once it's completely dried, I had some stain, and I'm going to put the stain over top of the crackle paint. It's just going to age it and give it more of a vintage look. I'm replacing the knob that was on there with this knob so we have a place to hang the drawer when it's all finished. I'm going to tape off the inside of that teapot. I've taken it outside and I'm spraying it with this lovely spray paint. Now the teapot's completely dry. I'm going to take that tape out from the inside and we're going to attach it to the top of that drawer. I'm using this old door pull and I'm going to screw it into the top of the drawer, attaching the teapot. I found this plaque at the dollar store and it's had a piece of paper decoupaged on it. I'm going to rip off that decoupage and get it cleaned down right to the wood, and we're going to turn it into a sign. And to make the sign, we're going to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I designed these graphics, printed it off on my LaserJet printer, made sure to reverse the text. I've painted that little plaque with a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint. I sanded it, distressed it, and then put the graphics on. And now it's been 24 hours. I dampened the paper, rubbed it off, and it's all set. I wanted to age that teapot a little bit, so I took some 80 grit sandpaper and just went around the edges so it looked a little bit more old and vintage. Had this piece of chain that I'm gonna loop onto the top. This spindle that was cut in half is going to go on the bottom. Hang tight with me, this is super cute. This is what I turned it into. A fun little birdhouse. The teapot acts as a little house for the birds to go in. Home tweet home. The little spindle they can perch on. How cute is that? This poor little vase has been in my shed for probably since last Halloween. I painted it orange. I'm not liking it right now. I had this cement color oops paint that I found at Home Depot. I turned it into some sand paint, and I'm going to paint over that orange paint with this gray sand paint, and it almost gives it a cement look. So I've turned this orange little pot into this beautiful cement looking planter for my patio. Let's make a sign for the garden with a scrap piece of pine. I want to make it look old and vintage, so I'm taking a hammer, really dinging it all around the edges and anywhere where it would have naturally aged. Then I'm taking some stain and I'm going to stain that board completely. It's going to soak into all those little nooks and crannies that we created with the hammer. I just love being able to take a new piece of wood and make it look old and vintage and rustic. Next, we're going to put on a coat of black homemade chalk paint. All these steps might seem like a lot of work, but in the end, it's taking a plain piece of wood and making it look more authentic and making it look better when it's turned into a sign. We're now going to do a crackle paint technique on this. I'm using my Elmer's school glue and I'm pouring a generous amount on top of that paint after it's dried. We're going to spread that glue all over that piece of wood. And then once we have the glue spread out, we're going to let it sit for about a minute. We want it to start to get a little bit tacky. It's all ready now. We're going to take our homemade chalk paint and in long strokes from one end to the other, we're going to paint on top of that glue while it is still tacky. And you'll see as that paint dries, it's going to create a crackle finish that looks fantastic and authentic and old. It's completely dry now. I'm going to sand around the edges and we're ready to turn this into a sign. I've printed my graphic off on regular computer paper, sizing it to my project, and then we're going to apply it onto that wood with some Mod Podge. This process will also work with an inkjet printer. I have lots of tutorials comparing the inkjet against the LaserJet on my YouTube channel. You can check that out if you want. You're going to put a light amount of that Mod Podge over the graphic. This product that I'm using is exactly like Mod Podge. I couldn't find Mod Podge when I was looking for it, and this works just as well. I bought this one at Michael's from Decor. You have to make sure when you're doing this technique that you reverse your text. If you don't, when you make your sign, your letters will be backwards. It's 24 hours later. I let it dry completely, and now I've got a rag with a little bit of water on it, and I'm dampening the paper so the graphics just start to show through. And then I'm using my fingers and we're rubbing away all of that paper. And as we do that, the graphics are going to stay on our sign, the paper is going to rub off, and it's that easy to make a sign with Mod Podge. I'm going to hang this out in my garden, so I need something to hang it from. I'm drilling a couple holes in the top, and I'm going to put through some twine, tie it nice and tightly, and then we're going to seal it up with some polyacrylic sealer. This is an outdoor formula because it's going to be out in the elements, and I want my sign to last for a long time. If you're making signs and they're going to be inside, you can buy the water-based polyacrylic sealer for indoors, and it works perfect. So that's how easy it is to create your own signs with a little bit of Mod Podge, computer paper, and a piece of wood. What do you think? This might be one of my favorite signs that I've ever made. I made this sign in one of my very first videos when I first started my YouTube channel, and I just love it, and I know some of you probably haven't seen it, so I wanted to share it. This is a piece of salvaged wood from a table. It's an actual table leg, and I'm going to decoupage a beautiful floral napkin onto it. A little trick when you're decoupaging and you're putting more than one napkin on, always like to rip the end that you're going to match the next napkin up with, and it just helps it blend in better. When I do projects like this, it always makes me feel better for not getting rid of all those bits and pieces that I save. The table legs, the spindles, the old rusty bits and pieces, because one day I always put together something that's absolutely beautiful just from junk. Once it was all dry, I took it outside and I sanded all around the edges and got rid of all that leftover napkin, and it blended in beautifully. And now we're going to seal it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer. And we're going to use the same technique again, the reverse technique. I use this, like I said before, for almost everything. It's so affordable and easy to do. It sometimes takes a little bit of practice to get the feel of rubbing off the paper, but once you get the hang of it, it works fantastic. You don't have the cost of the vinyl if you're using a Cricut, and with a stencil, you're limited to what signs you can make unless you buy all kinds of stencils. With this, you just download your graphic, print it, and make a sign. I want to hang my sign to the table leg. I've got these fence staples, you can find them at the hardware store, and this old chain, and I'm going to attach the two together. And the sign is all ready for the paper to be rubbed off. And we're going to seal it up with our polyacrylic sealer. I had two of these table legs. I made a vintage garden and the fresh flowers, and I absolutely adore them. That floral napkin looked perfect on the legs, and the signs finished them off. A beautiful serving tray with a rattan border, but this dated stencil in the middle of it was not doing it any favors. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and revamp it completely. Firstly, I applied some paint stripper over the stencil in a well-ventilated area with my respirator mask on. And since the stencil seemed to be paint-based from probably the 70s or 80s, I was hopeful that that stripper would work its magic, and it did. After letting it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, I scraped away at it and the stencil started to come off. I repeated this process with a second coat of that paint stripper to ensure that I had every little bit of that stencil removed. After removing the label and that varnish completely, I decided to give it a really good wash with some soapy water, set it aside, and let it dry thoroughly. Once it was dry, I went back in with a 120 grit piece of sanding paper on my sander to remove any leftover little bits of varnish and stencil that might not have come off with that paint remover. With the surface now smooth and ready, I mixed up some instant coffee with hot water and applied it on the tray using a rag. This is a really great DIY stain. The result was perfect. It was a perfect match to the color of the rest of the tray. Once the coffee stain had completely dried, I sealed it up with some polyacrylic sealer, and we transformed this old dated thrift store tray into a stylish modern piece. It'll be perfect for serving drinks up on the patio this summer, or I can just display it on my table as a centerpiece. When you're at the thrift store, look for items like this, the back massagers or the beaded chairs that you put in your vehicles, because you can take them apart. I paid $2.99 plus I had a discount code at Value Village, and you're going to get all these huge beads that you can craft with. So keep your eye out for those. I have this yarn that I also picked up at the thrift store, and we're going to turn this into a garland. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to make really pretty tassels. I got my cell phone and I wrapped the yarn around about 30 times, and then I tied it at the top with a really tight knot, cleaned up all the extra little bits of yarn hanging down. Now I'm going to make a loop. I put the loop at the top of the tassel, and then I'm going to cut the yarn, and then I'm going to wrap the other end of that loop around the tassel really tight, and that's going to make the top of our tassel. I do have a full tutorial that goes a lot slower and more detailed instructions on how to make a tassel. I'll put that link down below in the description. Once you have it wrapped around and you like the way that it looks, we're going to take that end that we just cut and loop it through that loop at the top, pull the bottom portion of that loop string through, and we have tightened that around our tassel, and it's tucked away nice and neat, and you're not going to see any knots. And then you can just trim away the extra pieces of yarn. Cut the end of your tassel, and now you can grab a coffee or tea and you can unravel all the bottom pieces of that tassel, and it'll make it look nice and fluffy and full. Now let's get using those beads. I've got 3 strands of the yarn, the length that I want my garland to be, and I'm just going to tie a knot and attach it to one of those tassels. You can also look in the jewelry section of the thrift store. You can always find some really beautiful beaded necklaces or bracelets that you can take apart and upcycle into garlands like this also. And now I'm just going to thread through all of these beads. And if you're having a hard time getting your yarn through the beads, I always like just to get a piece of tape, and you can tape the end of your yarn, and that'll keep the pieces together and make it easier to thread through your beads. Beaded garland with beads this big are really pricey, so this was a really fantastic upcycle. $2.99 for the beads with a discount code, yarn that I already had that I bought at the thrift store ages ago, and I've put together this beautiful garland. Thrift store frames are everywhere and they come in all sorts of styles. Here's a super easy way to upcycle them. Find a frame that has a really ornate design. Then get creative, print your own picture or use a page from a book or a magazine. Pop it into the frame and boom, you have instant art. I did this myself with a map I sell on Etsy. I printed it out, crinkled it up, added some coffee stain for that old vintage look, and it's so simple yet it turns out so amazing. You can totally do this and have your own unique artwork in no time. Coffee staining paper is a breeze. It transforms a plain white image into something vintage, unique, and full of character. Here's how. Mix instant coffee with warm water and spread it all over your print or design. And then grab a heat gun to dry it, giving that old, aged appearance. It's simple and a fun way to add a touch of nostalgia to your artwork. Give it a try and watch your creations come to life with a charming vintage vibe. After giving the glass a really good cleaning, I'm ready to complete this. Simply add the map to the frame, put the back on, and voila, you've created a stunning artwork using beautiful thrift store frames at a fraction of the cost compared to buying them from a department store. I found the frame didn't even need it to be painted. I love the gold and the dark wood colors, and the map complements it perfectly. This successful upcycle proves that you don't have to look far to find treasures. Next time you spot a frame at the thrift store, go ahead and give a project like this a try. Lot of signs that I'm showing you today because there's so many ideas of stuff that you can make for your outdoor decor or your garden. This one is made on a piece of pallet wood and I'm going to make a flower market sign. I've sized the graphics to fit on this piece of pallet wood and we're ready to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. A free piece of pallet wood made beautiful. Is a face off of an old antique dresser. I couldn't get the handles off of it, so I thought I would just leave it and then I would use the other side to make into a farmhouse welcome sign for my front door. So I flipped it over and I'm going to paint the back of that dresser door with some black chalk paint, and that's going to be the front of my sign. I love my homemade chalk paint recipe, works fabulous. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can go and check out that recipe and mix some up for yourself. Now I'm going to use some Vaseline along the edges of this sign so I can make it look chippy and vintage, and I'm just putting some on my fingertip and I'm just putting it anywhere on the sign where it would have some natural wear all around the edges and on the top and on the bottom. And then I put on a coat of some brown chalk paint. Gonna put on some more Vaseline on top of that brown chalk paint, just in random little spots around the edges. And then anywhere you've put the Vaseline, the paint will not adhere to it and it'll show the color underneath of it. And now I'm gonna put a coat of my homemade white chalk paint, and then I'm gonna put another coat of my white homemade chalk paint, and then I'm gonna take it outside, give it a really good sanding with a coarse sandpaper, and you'll see all the chippiness that that Vaseline leaves and shows all those different colors through the edge of the wood and gives it a real rustic, really vintage look. Now we're ready to put the graphics on. Again, the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer, I love it. This is the graphic that I'm going to use. Welcome to our home. I have put the graphic into my Word program and I have sized it to fit my board, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat. If you've bought my graphics, or if you have made your own graphics and you're not really sure how to reverse or how to size within your Word program, I have a full tutorial on how to do that. I'll put a link down below in the description and you can go and watch it and it'll help you out. This is set overnight. I'm just taking a damp rag, I'm just dampening it just so you can start to see the graphics show through. You want to be really careful because if you put too much water on this, it will take the graphic away, and you'll rub it off as you're working away on it. So it kind of takes practice to see how much water you actually need to take off the paper. And once you get that technique down, you're golden. And this type of sign, you can put a hanger on the back and hang it on your door, or you can just prop it up beside your door and it looks fantastic too. And now I'm just going to put a coat of my polyacrylic sealer in an outdoor formula and seal it up really well. And our welcome to our home sign is all finished, and I love the way that turned out, and I love it even more that I was able to upcycle an old front of a dresser drawer that was in the landfill and make it into something that was crappy and make it pretty. This isn't so much a thrift store frame, but it's a wooden plaque, $1.99. How can you not grab this and bring it home and upcycle it? It had this really ugly blue color already painted on it, so I'm going to distress it a little bit. I'm going to put on some black homemade chalk paint over the whole frame, let that completely dry. Then I'm going to add some Vaseline around the edges. This is just going to create a chippy finish when it's all done, kind of give it that authentic look. This is a really great easy technique if you have a piece of brand new wood and you want to make it look old. And now I'm going to paint over top of that Vaseline and black paint with some white homemade chalk paint, and just paint the whole plaque, let it dry. Then I'm going to go in with my sander. I've got some 80 grit sandpaper on my palm sander and sand all around the edges. And now we're ready to upcycle this wooden plaque. I had this old piece of newspaper and I am going to decoupage it onto the front of this plaque using my Mod Podge mat. Now, a trick to decoupaging is to not use very much Mod Podge, or you're going to get wrinkles. Inevitably, you're going to get some wrinkles, but if you don't want to get a lot, don't goop up on the Mod Podge. Just put a light coat. You don't need very much. Spread it right out to the edges, and then we're going to lay that plaque into that newspaper and pressing it down firmly. We're going to flip it over, and then we're going to rub out any wrinkles or any bubbles that might have happened. Again, with this project, you can put your own twist on it. You could use tissue paper, wrapping paper, so many possibilities. I just love that farmhouse look, so I've kind of gravitated to this old piece of newspaper. It's completely dry. Now I'm going in with a piece of sandpaper and I'm lightly sanding around the edge, and you can see how it gives you that nice, crisp, clean, sanded edge to work with your project. Now we're going to go in with some instant coffee and warm water, and we're going to age up this newspaper a little bit. We're not going to soak it. We're just putting a light coat across that whole newspaper, and you can see as soon as I introduce it onto that, how it gives it that vintage feel. I put this outside in the sun to dry completely, and now we're going to bring it back into the shed, and I've got some polyacrylic sealer and I'm sealing up this paper. You don't need very much, just a light coat. Again, if you're putting on too much, you're going to introduce those wrinkles and bubbles to come back into your paper. So just a light coat. We're going to set this aside and let it dry. I had this smashed tin can that I made quite a while ago in one of my tin can videos. I used my Cricut to add the label on the front, and I had this old hook. We're going to put the hook in the top of the plaque, put some floral foam in that tin can. I had these old flowers that I dried a long time ago from Valentine's Day that I'm going to incorporate into it and make a beautiful arrangement. And then we're going to pull it all together. We're going to hang that tin can on the front of that hook. I also added a hook on the back so we can hang it up. We don't want to forget about the hooks on the back. And all of this was put together so affordably. A tin can from the recycling bin, a plaque for $1.99, an old piece of newspaper that I had, and I love it. All I used was an old colander that I found at the thrift store, a piece of a spindle, and a wooden ring. I'm going to drill 4 holes in the colander evenly across the top of it, and then we're going to use some twine and measure it out to the length that we need to where we want to hang it. Once it's all measured out, we're going to attach it to that wooden ring and tie it to the colander. I wanted to give it a little bit of character, so I drilled a hole through that spindle, had a piece of wire, and I'm going to attach it to the bottom of the colander. So I've taken a colander and a spindle and a little bit of twine, and I've made it into a really adorable plant hanger that you can put on your porch, and the little dangly spindle on the bottom finishes it off completely. Next upcycle is this coat rack that I found at the thrift store. It was really sturdy, except the hooks on the top were broken. There was 3 of them where the top hook had just snapped right off. So we're going to upcycle this and turn this into something very rustic and cabin-like that I can put at my log home here. I'm going to take these broken hooks off first. This very quickly turned out to be a bit of an issue because they had really not only screwed these in, but glued them down really well. So I knocked them off the best I could with a hammer, and then I took a chisel and I took off the rest. I'm going to be able to clean it up when I get back to my shed with a sander. 80 grit sandpaper on my sander, and I sanded down the best I could where those hooks were. And now we're ready to distress this coat rack. I'm going to sand the entire coat rack and try to get that first layer of really orangey stain off. And then I'm going to go in with my hammer and I'm going to ding it all up and nick it and try to make it look like it's been an old worn piece of wood. You can also distress with a wire wheel, and this will give a really great aged appearance. You just have to be really careful with these. Do not wear gloves and hang on to your drill really tightly, because if this gets away on you, you can really hurt yourself. So if you're going to do this technique, just take some extra caution, but you can see that it's really aging up that wood really nice. And I'm happy now with how distressed it's looking. I got most of that stain off. I'm not really picky about it getting it completely cleaned off, but I'm happy with how distressed it looks now. I had some mist tint stain that I picked up at the hardware store, and that's what we're going to use on this project. And I'm just going to go over the entire coat rack. We're now ready to add the hooks back on. I picked these hooks up off of Amazon. I love the farmhouse cottage feel of them. I'm going to screw them back on where those other hooks were before. And I love the way this turned out. And we all know how much lumber costs. And to put a coat rack together for the price that I paid at the thrift store, I wouldn't have even been able to come close. So I love this upcycle. Love the hooks, and it fits in at the cabin really nicely. This is a fun one. I did this one recently with pallet wood and cling wrap, and it's just a painting technique that's really great to do with kids and lots of fun. Get out all of your acrylic paint, all the different colors, and we're gonna mix and match, and we're just gonna drop paint here and there on the board. Doesn't matter, this is just for fun, and it doesn't matter if it's messy or if you get too much in one place and not enough in another. It'll all turn out perfect. And then you're going to get a piece of saran wrap or cling wrap and lay it right into that paint. And this is where it's lots of fun with kids. Just let them use their fingers and blend all of that paint in together, and just keep blending until you get the color that you like. And when you're blending 2 or 3 colors together, you're making other colors. It's just so much fun. And these are beach and pool theme. I'm doing a beach sign and I'm doing a hello summer sign. Love the way that they turned out. This is the first thrift store frame that we're going to work on, and this is an easy one because it didn't even have a print in it and it's really easy to take apart. We're just going to remove the back and the pieces of cardboard and the matte frame, set that aside, and I have this piece of paper that I've painted some of my previous DIY projects on, and I love all the different variations of the different colors from my different projects. I want to add a little bit of depth and interest though to it, so I took some acrylic paint, I grabbed one of my tin cans, and I'm going to stamp some circles just randomly on it, and I really love the contrast of this blue color. This is such a thrifty way to upcycle frames because we're just using an old piece of paper that otherwise most people would have just thrown out. But I kind of think it almost looks like an abstract painting. I've got some stamps that I'm going to use too. I've got some of my yellow acrylic paint, and I'm just going to roll it in the corners or wherever I think that it needs a little bit more interest. Thrift store frames are something that you can find really easily in every thrift store. Just sort through, find things that catch your eye or are a little bit more original, and there's so many ideas of how you can upcycle them. I've got 4 projects today, so make sure you stick through to the end because there's some really fun ones that are really thrifty and you can do on a complete budget. I also had a little flower stamp. I'm just stamping in little areas here and there. I kind of like the way that it looks now. I think it's just about ready. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry completely. Now it's dried completely, we're going to add it back into the frame, putting it all together. I'm going to tape it at the top with a little bit of packing tape so it stays in place. Put the backing on, put the staples back in. And then we're going to head into my craft room because we're going to break out my Cricut. I don't use my Cricut very often, but this is a project that is perfect for it. I got out some permanent vinyl. I designed a graphic. This graphic's available on my Etsy store. So once you see this finished project and if you like it, you can head to my Etsy store and check it out. And we're cutting it. I'm going to weed all that extra vinyl off. And then we're going to stick this onto the front of that glass on the frame. And it kind of gives it almost like a 3D effect. Of course, you can use any type of quote or picture and put it on the glass on top of your print, and you can personalize it. So many ways to do a project like this. Just use your imagination. But I love being able to use that piece of paper underneath that I did previous DIY projects on and incorporate it into this thrift store frame upcycle. What do you think? I absolutely love it, and it's definitely one of a kind. Pitchfork. I actually got this pitchfork quite a while ago from the dump. Dug it out, brought it home, and I painted it back then with some chalk paint, and it started to weather a little bit. So I'm going to refresh it with some of my homemade chalk paint, and I'm going to put a really pretty graphic on it. Okay, my chalk paint has completely dried, and now I'm going to put this welcome graphic on it. If you've been following my channel, you know I love my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer to put on my graphics, and that's what I'm going to use for this project. I've printed off this graphic on my LaserJet printer. Make sure you reverse your text if you want to do a project like this, just on regular computer paper. And all the graphics that I'm using today in all 3 of my projects are available in my Etsy store. I'm going to use my Mod Podge matte, and I'm just going to put a light coat over the whole graphic. Make sure you're covering the whole piece of paper, and then I'm going to flip it over and center it where I want it on my pitchfork, and then rub any wrinkles or bubbles out so it's nice and smooth. I have quite a few tutorials on my channel that go really into depth into this method. If you want to learn how to do it, I'll put a link down below in the description so you can go back and you can watch those, and I'll show you a more thorough step-by-step tutorial. Now my Graphic has completely dried. I've let it sit overnight, and I'm just taking a damp rag and I'm just wetting that paper just so you can start to see those graphics through. And then I'm going to rub off the paper and you're left with a really pretty graphic. I've sealed it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer, and look how cute this is. These look so cute, propped up on your porch, some flowers around them for a farmhouse feel. Old milk can that I have had on my porch for quite a while. The paint has faded on it, so I'm going to refresh it. I'm going to put on a coat of my homemade black chalk paint over the entire milk can. And I'm going to put a customized graphic on this of our last name and the year that we were established. I'm going to make my graphic the size of a piece of paper. So I'm putting this on just as a guide so I can tape off the area that I want to paint with some white chalk paint. And if you want to do a project like this, make sure you use some good painter's tape so the paint doesn't bleed through when you paint it on. So now that I have all the tape on, I'm going to peel that piece of paper away, and I have a perfect square the same size as a piece of paper. And I'm just going to take my white chalk paint and I'm going to paint in between that square, and it'll probably take 2 or 3 coats to get it covered really well. If you're interested in me doing one of these custom graphics for you with your last name and a year on them, I do have it listed in my Etsy store, so you can head over there and check it out, and I can custom make you one. Now this is completely dried, and I'm just going to peel away that painter's tape, and I'm left with a perfect square. And this is the graphic that I'm going to use on my milk can, and I think it's the perfect graphic at a front door. And again, I've put this in my Word program, sized it to the size that I want it, printed it off on my LaserJet printer on regular computer paper, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to put it right in that painted square, and then I'm going to flip it over after I've got all the Mod Podge on, get all the wrinkles and bubbles out of it, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight and dry really well before I rub off the paper, and the graphics will be left on my milk can. Okay, everything is completely dried. I'm taking a rag, just dampening it so you can start to see the graphics through, and then rubbing off all of that paper. Now I wanted to show you, sometimes not all the graphics turn out perfect. I was rubbing this and a little piece of the G kind of rubbed away. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of Mod Podge right on that black ink of where it rubbed off, and then press it down exactly where it goes on that graphic and line it up really well. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry really thoroughly, and it should fix itself and have that black ink transfer back onto that graphic on my milk can. I just wanted to show you that not every graphic that I do turns out perfect, and it takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice to get the hang of it. And even with me doing these graphics for a lot of years, I still have some that don't turn out perfect. But I love the way that this one turned out. It just kind of gives it that farmhouse feel and kind of rustic look. I'm going to seal this milk can with some polyacrylic sealer outdoor. You want to make sure if this is going to be outside in the elements, you're using an outdoor formula to make sure that it's sealed really well. I'm so glad I finally got around to kind of sprucing this milk can up. It's been sitting at my front door and it's kind of looked dingy, and it's one of those projects that I never really got around to doing, but I love it now and I can't wait to get it at my front door. Love the graphic also. We're going to upcycle this glass coffee jar and a solar light from the dollar store. I want to paint the glass jar, and the first step that I like to do when painting glass is to give it a light spray of primer, and then I had some of this accent stone spray paint. I wanted to give it a little bit of texture, and it works fantastic for that. I'm going to take the stake out of the bottom of the solar light, fill up that glass jar with some gravel from my driveway, get out my E6000 and put a little bit around the rim of that glass jar and just set the solar light into it. The weight of the gravel in the glass jar keeps it from tipping over, and I added some twine around the neck of it for embellishment. And once the sun goes down, for my next upcycling project, I had a small vase that had a souvenir label from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Often you can remove these labels or logos from vases with just some effort and the help of some sandpaper or a scuff pad. It may take some time and some effort, but if you persist, they will eventually come off. And I was thrilled because I really love the shape and the color of this vase. And I was delighted when I was able to manage to successfully remove and smooth out that tourist label from Myrtle Beach and give me an updated vase that I can add into my home decor. Like the piggy bank, which had an enamel paint likely baked right into the glass, this vase seems to have a stenciled design, making it easier to remove with some elbow grease. To complete the transformation, I applied some dark antiquing wax all over the vase, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the final result, and I'm glad I could upcycle it without it appearing tacky or resembling a vacation souvenir. This old birdhouse, it has definitely seen better days. The paint that was on it has completely disintegrated on it, and some of the nails were popped out, and it just needed some TLC, but it was still in good enough shape that I'm going to be able to fix it up. Just taking my hammer and just pushing in any of those nails that had started to pop out, and then I'm going to give it a really good sanding with an 80 grit sandpaper so it'll be ready to paint. I am loving this yellow paint. I love picking up these little testers too. It's just the right amount of paint for a couple projects. And I'm also loving this paintbrush from Zebra, the Palm Pro. It works fantastic to get in all those little nooks and crannies on your small projects. I love all of their paintbrushes, and they have different types for different projects. I'll put the link down below in the description, and you can head over to their website and check them out because it is a must for paintbrushes. I thought the blue was going to really complement the yellow, so I'm going to do a salt painting technique on the roof to give it a rustic kind of chippy look. I'm going to paint on the paint. This is just a regular latex paint, a sample that I bought at Home Depot, and I'm just painting it all over the roof. And then once I have that done, while the paint is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle on pickling salt. You can use any type of salt, but the pickling salt, I like the texture that it gives and the chippiness. It's just a nice coarse salt. And just sprinkle it right into that wet paint. Once everything's all dry, I'm taking it outside because it is messy, and I'm sanding it down with my 80 grit sandpaper. I think it turned out fantastic. I love the chippy feel, and I'm going to add some embellishments. I found this old door pull and this dresser drawer pull, and I'm going to add them onto the birdhouse just as some focal points. And that looks 100% better than that birdhouse that I found in the dump at the wood pile. I was able to upcycle it and make it pretty again, and it's ready for some renters. This wire basket And this wooden trivet, I'm not sure what it was off of or where it was from. It's really sturdy and beautiful. I knew I wanted to use that in this project, and an old spindle off a table. I'm going to give the wire basket and the trivet a coat of black spray paint. I find sometimes when I find things, I just tuck them away, and it takes a while for me to get inspired and figure out what I want to do with them. And this is one of these projects. I had all three of these things tucked away, and it just all of a sudden came to me, and I put it together. I drilled a hole down the middle of the trivet, and I'm doing a little test hole in the bottom of the spindle, and I'm going to screw those two pieces together. I'm using these staple nails to put the basket on top of the spindle. It was a little tricky to get that hammer in and out of there, but I made it work, and I got it on there nice and sturdy. And I've created a beautiful planter with just junk. The wire basket, the spindle, and that trivet on the bottom, and it all pulled together beautifully. So that's why sometimes I can create these wonderful projects, because I don't throw anything out, because you never know when you're going to need it. Today is this vintage jewelry box that I found at the thrift store. I see these all the time, and they're always priced really reasonably, but I find they just look really dated. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to upcycle this one. First thing that I'm going to do is pull out these little knobs, and they just come out really easy. They just pop right out. And then I'm going to take out the innards of this jewelry box. Most of the time when I find these, they're dusty or dirty and stained, so I prefer just to take it all out. If you find one and they still look nice, then leave it in, but my preference is to pull it all out. And when you see what I do with it afterwards, you might want to pull it out also. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a scraper, and if you have a little bit of glue residue, I find if you spritz it with some water, let it soak for 10 minutes and then scrape it, it'll all come out nice and clean. Now, I'm unsure what kind of wood these jewelry boxes are, but they scratch really easy. So I'm just going to take that top layer off with a scuff pad and just scuff it all over. And that's going to allow the paint that we're going to use after to stick better. I'll put a link down below in the description for this scuff pad, and you can grab some. And then I'm just taking a wipe and I'm just wiping it down nice and clean. Now we're ready to paint. For the first coat, I like to use a primer. So I'm using this bin primer, and it'll allow any paint that I put on top of it to stick really well. Because this is a really shiny surface, we want to make sure we have a bond. Once that spray primer was all dry, I went in with my homemade white chalk paint and I painted the entire jewelry box. If you've not tried making some of your own homemade chalk paint, you should give it a try because it works really well and it's affordable. Some of the store-bought chalk paints can be really expensive, so this is a really great alternative. This jewelry box took 2 coats of the chalk paint, and once it was completely dry, I went back in with a piece of sandpaper and I'm using a 120 grit, and I'm just distressing around the edges. I just like the look of that. You can skip this if you're not into that farmhouse distressed feel, but I really love it. These little jewelry boxes make really nice gifts, so I always grab them when I see them. So we have this all distressed now. I really love the way that it's looking, and we're ready now to go on to the next step. I am going to put a graphic on the top of this jewelry box using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. Using some Mod Podge matte and a graphic that I printed off on my laser printer. Make sure if you're doing this technique to reverse your text. This graphic is available in my Etsy store if you want to grab it and it's already reversed. I'll put the link for that down below in the description. With this technique, you're just putting a light coat of that matte Mod Podge across the entire graphic. Now, if you don't have a laser printer, don't worry, you can also do this with an inkjet. It just takes a little bit more time and it has more of a distressed look, but it can be done. We're just gonna lay that graphic, make sure it's centered, and then press out any bubbles or wrinkles. And then we're going to set it aside and let it dry for 24 hours. While we're waiting for that to dry, I picked out a piece of scrapbooking paper that I really loved, and we're gonna line the inside of that jewelry box with the scrapbook paper. I've cut it to size to fit in the top and the bottom drawer. I'm putting down some Mod Podge matte and then sticking that paper on top. This is why I like taking out the insides of these jewelry boxes, because you can customize it so nice with so many different papers. It's now the next day. I'm taking a little bit of water and a damp cloth and I'm wetting that paper until you can just start to see the graphic show through, and then I'm rubbing it off. And as we're rubbing off the paper, that graphic is going to stay on our little jewelry box, and we're transferring a graphic really easy and really affordable. I sealed everything up with a polyacrylic sealer, and here's our upcycled jewelry box. How cute is this? And I think I picked this up for $3.99, and I think one of my nieces is going to love this at Christmas time. Another item I often come across in the kitchen area of the thrift stores is rolling pins. And all you need to upcycle these is some acrylic paint. Once you paint the handles and place them in a crock on your counter in your kitchen, they look fantastic. But you don't have to worry, the food's not going to come in contact with the painted handles. And we're also going to seal these up with some polyacrylic sealer to make them really durable. This not only adds a pop of color to your kitchen space, but it also is so incredibly easy to do. You'll always find rolling pins for really reasonable prices, and it's a DIY project that you can complete in an afternoon. Next time you visit the thrift store, keep an eye out for them. Grab some paint, an old pottery crock, and give this a try. It's a perfect way to display these rolling pins once they've completely dried. If you want, you can even grab some sandpaper and distress them, giving them a charming, well-loved look. I love the way it enhances the appearance of these rolling pins, and it always takes them to the next level, really effortlessly. This mirror caught my eye. It's a gold frame plastic one, but I saw potential in turning it into a rustic patina looking frame with just a little bit of acrylic and chalk paint and my trusty stencil brush. I used homemade black chalk paint first as the base, just lightly dry brushing all over that mirror. It's important to make sure to get into all those little nooks and crannies for that authentic patina effect. After setting it aside and letting it dry, I then went back in and got my acrylic paint and used a turquoise color. I'm aiming to achieve an old rusted metal look for this project, and I've got a trick up my sleeve that's going to give it the perfect patina effect. By layering that turquoise on top of the black with a light hand, I'm dry brushing that turquoise over the frame, allowing the gold and the black to peek through, and it gives it a realistic weathered effect. When it's all finished, it's going to be hard to believe that this started out as a cheap plastic frame, and I absolutely love this transformation. Project, I went to my recycling bin and I grabbed an empty egg carton, and we're going to do something really beautiful with these. You've probably all seen these before. Did you know that you can make flowers out of these egg cartons, and they look so beautiful when they're all done? I'm just going to cut these into each individual little egg cups, and then we're ready to start our project. I've got them all trimmed around the edges, and now I'm just going to cut in each corner right down to the flat of the egg carton. It's going to take quite a few of them, so just work away and make sure you have really sharp scissors. Okay, I've got them all cut and we're ready to put them together. You're going to take your hot glue gun and put a little bit of hot glue right in the center, and then you're going to take another one and just kind of mold it a little bit and then put it so it's off-centered to the one below it, so it looks like petals. You don't want them stacked up so the petals are together. You want them off-centered. Now we're going to cut a strip off the top of that egg carton, and we're just going to roll it into a cylinder. Once you have it rolled together, put a little bit of hot glue in the bottom of that flower, and then put your cylinder in there, and you have a beautiful egg carton flower. So I'm just going to work away at putting all of these together so I have enough to go completely around my project. And once they're all done, these are really tricky to paint. I'm going to put them in the top of that eggshell container. I'm going to take them outside and spray paint them with some black spray paint. And I picked up another one of those mirrors from the dollar store that were at the thrift store that I picked up for 50 cents. And we're just going to glue those flowers all around the outside of that mirror. If you wanted to do different colors, you could take the mirror out of the frame, spray paint that round plastic part, and then spray paint your flowers so they would all match. The black fits my decor for where I want to put it, so I left it all black. And look how that took that plain ordinary mirror to the next level with those beautiful egg carton flowers.
Lamps at the thrift store is pretty easy, but many of them look really outdated. Still, I love getting them at a great price and giving them a fresh new look through upcycling. I recently found this plain lamp and I wanted to transform it into a natural boho piece. To kickstart the process, I started masking off the cord and the light bulb area. Buying secondhand items from the thrift store is not only a great way to live sustainably, but it also reduces the demand for new products, saving resources and energy used in manufacturing. It's like giving the environment a high five while finding cool stuff. I finished masking off everything and I'm super excited about the baking soda paint I've mixed up. It has this amazing texture that resembles ceramic or stone. All you have to do is dab it on up and down to create that extra texture. Making baking soda paint is a breeze and I have a tutorial for you. I'll put that link down below in the description. Once the first coat of baking soda paint had completely dried, I wasn't quite satisfied with that stark white color. So I grabbed my acrylic paint and I found a gorgeous off-white shade. Just like before, I'm dabbing it on. The best part, that since we have that textured baking soda paint underneath, the acrylic paint also takes on that textured look. After applying one full coat, I decided to add some coffee grounds for even more texture. I simply dabbed the dry coffee grounds from the leftover coffee this morning that I let dry into the wet acrylic paint. It gives a subtle aged appearance that I'm aiming for with this piece. Remember to dab up and down to maintain that desired texture using this painting technique. Once everything had completely dried, I need to seal it up with a water-based polyacrylic sealer just to add that extra protection. Now it's time to shift our focus to the lampshade and make it equally as fabulous. I have a whole stash of ribbons and I picked one that matches a lampshade beautifully. With my handy hot glue gun, I'm simply attaching it along the base of the lampshade. It creates a really nice ruffled look that instantly elevates this lamp. It's amazing how a little paint and a touch of ribbon can transform an old lamp into something fabulous. Next time you visit the thrift store, make a beeline to the lamp section. Take a peek and see if there's anything waiting to be upcycled. Trust me, it's a breeze and you can quickly update a lamp to match your style or your home decor without breaking the bank. Why spend on something new when you can give new life to an old treasure? This upcycling project is an absolute delight and anyone can do it. Give it a shot and enjoy the satisfaction of creating something unique and fabulous from the thrift store. These unappealing votive, or I think they're called tart candle warmers at the thrift store, yet there's always potential for them to become something much more beautiful.
With just a quick and easy coat of spray paint, these dated finds can be instantly updated. In this case, it simply was just some matte spray paint that transformed this into a versatile and chic addition to any home style. From traditional granny chic to boho, it's amazing how just a small touch-up can breathe new life into a thrift store treasure.
Fell in love with this pot as soon as I saw it. Handmade pottery. I seem to be drawn to all of these pottery pieces at the thrift store lately. And I am going to make a macrame hanger for this pot. After measuring out how much of the twine I needed, this twine I actually bought at the dollar store too, I've put it all together to make 3 strands. Now the wooden rings, if you are in the thrift store, have a look on the wall where they have all the little bags put together, because I found a full bag of these wooden rings. I think there might have been 12 in the bag for like $3.99, and I have been making macrame hangers with these for quite a while. I'm adding a piece at the top to secure that wooden ring on, trimming off the edges, and then we're going to do a little bit of macrame. If you don't know how to macrame, there's so many great tutorials on YouTube here that you can check out, but I'm just doing a couple really basic knots to put this together. Shopping secondhand before buying new is such a smart choice for several reasons. First and foremost, it's a great way to find unique items that you won't see in everyone else's home. You can discover vintage clothing, one-of-a-kind pieces, and even high-end designer items at a fraction of the cost. And secondhand shopping is also an eco-friendly option, as it helps reduce the amount of waste that ends up in our landfills. By purchasing items that have already been produced, you're preventing new resources from being used and reducing the demand for new items. Additionally, many secondhand shops donate a portion of their profits to charitable causes, so you're supporting a good cause when you shop secondhand. Okay, I've got my hanger almost finished. I'm just going to tie it now through those 3 holes that were already made in that ceramic pot to secure it really well. And then after I have them all tied, I'm going to gather it at the bottom of the pot and make a tassel. Despite all of my DIY experience, there's one thing that I've never tried before, and that's making pottery. It's been on my bucket list for a while now, and I'm really looking forward in the near future to take a pottery class and finally create some beautiful homemade pottery pieces of my own. I'm thrilled to finally hang this in our log home and put a little plant inside. It looks beautiful hanging in the window, and it just adds a little bit of greenery and nature to our space.
I've come across numerous glass and ceramic vases at thrift stores that appear really outdated. Let me show you a few examples I found and how I plan to transform them doing some upcycling. First item I'm working on is this charming little piggy bank. It was absolutely adorable, but it had a logo on it from somebody that had probably went on a trip overseas. My initial step will be taking it outside and applying a coat of spray primer over that entire piggy bank. Once it was dry, I got out my napkins that had a really cute floral print on them that I picked up at the dollar store, and we're going to start decoupaging. I like tearing the paper into small pieces because it helps it blend in nicely when applying the decoupage technique. I'm going to be using Mod Podge matte for this. First, I'm going to apply just a thin layer on the piggy bank, and then I'm going to randomly stick that torn napkin all over the entire surface until it's completely covered. You can find plenty of adorable napkins at the dollar store. It's particularly useful to keep an eye out for seasonal ones and then add them to your collection. That way, when you have a decoupage project like this, you'll have a variety of options that you can look through to find that special one-of-a-kind napkin that you can use. Or if you have a hard time finding a napkin that you like, you can always custom make your own. I love doing that, and I do it quite often. I have a full tutorial on how to make custom napkins. I'll put that link down below in the description. Look how adorable this little piggy bank turned out. It is completely dried now. I've sealed it with a polyacrylic sealer, and it's perfect for keeping my change in. It's such a cute little piece that no longer looks outdated or tacky with someone else's vacation memories. slightly outdated look to it. If you're a fan of blue, it could be a great addition to your home decor, but since I don't have a lot of blue elements in my home, I decided to give it a makeover using some coffee paint. This incredible textured paint is perfect for revitalizing old items and giving them a modern touch. I mixed it with my own coffee grounds, and you can find a detailed tutorial on how to make this recipe on my channel. I'll provide the link to that down below in the description, and if you want to give it a try. Additionally, I also have a recipe booklet in my Etsy store that includes this particular recipe. To transform the candle holder, I started by applying a complete coat of that coffee paint and letting it dry thoroughly. Then I added a second coat to enhance that texture, patting it on. Finally, I sealed it with some polyacrylic sealer, and by doing so, we've turned this dated candle holder into a stunning modern piece that will perfectly blend into any decor due to its neutral color. Now let's see what we can do with this item. Once again, I really love the shape of it and the lid, but the graphics on it don't align with my personal style. It appears to have been maybe like a tobacco container or something similar, as the label seems to be that enamel paint again, so it's not going to sand off that easy. Therefore, I'm going to take it outside. I'm going to give it a really good coat of matte black spray paint, and I'm going to do the inside and the outside so it'll be completely covered. And then I'm going to let it dry before I go on to the next step. I didn't like that dated varnish on the lid, so I used some 120 grit sandpaper and I sanded it off. And after that, I sealed it with a polyacrylic sealer. Now let's get back to that jar. My goal is to give it an aged, worn pottery look, and to achieve this, I went out to my garden and I gathered up some dirt, and then I proceeded to rub that dirt into the spray painted surface, working it in and brushing off the extra as I went along. Finally, I applied a coat of Mod Podge matte. This technique is absolutely fantastic. And once I had it completely covered with the Mod Podge, I went back to that dirt, and then I'm just going to sprinkle it into that wet Mod Podge. Once completed, it transforms a plain pot or vase into something that resembles an old vintage ceramic piece from a bygone era and looks like it's been around for a century. You can achieve this effect with just a little bit of Mod Podge and just some dirt. I set it aside, let the Mod Podge dry completely, and then I went in and I just rubbed off any of that extra dirt, exposing little bits and pieces of that black underneath to give it even more of an aged look. When that was done, I went back with the Mod Podge matte again and sealed it all up. And that's it. The project's all finished, and I really loved how it turned out with that pottery-like aged look. It's definitely much better than it was when it had those tobacco graphics on it. Frames that I picked up at the thrift store. The frames are all painted with what feels like maybe an oil-based paint, and I'm going to make them nice and chippy and distressed looking. I picked them up for $5.99 a piece, and they were 50% off, so it's a really great deal. And let's get painting. I'm going to be using my homemade chalk paint recipe, and I've made it with some black paint, and I'm going to put a base coat on all three of those picture frames. I've taken the landscape picture out of the middle. It was just stapled in with little nails, so I removed those, and I'm going to paint all three frames. I'll put a link down below and up above here in the corner for my homemade chalk paint recipe, and it's really simple and it adheres to any surface, so you don't need any prep or any sanding. And I'm also going to paint over all of these landscape print. These are just prints, they're not actual pictures. And now I've completed all pieces. Now when you're doing these frames, you don't want to use sandpaper or sand too much because it takes away the details. So I like using this packing tape, and I have a Scotch brand that works really well, and I'm going to use some of my candle wax to distress it also.
The first thing you want to do is I'm using a pillar candle that I just cut in half so it's a little bit easier to manage, and I'm just going to rub it anywhere on the picture frame where I don't want paint to adhere. And I'm going to do it pretty aggressive because I want a really chippy, distressed look on these frames. And I like using these little candlesticks because it will get in the little corners where you can't with that pillar candle, and you're just going to rub it anywhere where it would naturally, if it had aged, had paint removed. It's really great for getting in these little corners, and it just gives it so much more of an authentic look when you can get in those little places. Whenever I'm out thrifting, I always seem to be drawn to these wooden picture frames, and I love being able to do these types of different painting techniques to just take them to the next level to make them look really nice in your home decor. I'm doing really neutral colors today, just black and white, but you could use some really funky colors and layer up this paint with this technique and it would look fabulous. Now I've got my white homemade chalk paint, and I'm going to paint right over that black paint and right over that candle wax that I just rubbed on in all those little nooks and crannies on that frame. And again, this is the same recipe as what I made with the black paint. Really simple, easy to make, and a lot more affordable than buying the store-bought, and it works just as good for me. And I'm not using any sort of technique when I'm painting these frames. I just kind of slop it on sometimes because you just kind of want to have that aged look to it. And if it has a little drip here and there or a little spot where you've missed, that just makes it look even better. Okay, I'll finish painting that first one, and you can see I've kind of not put paint in every little corner. Some I've left a little black peeking through, and I'm going to work away on these other two frames. And I'm also going to paint the middle pieces. I'm going to put a little bit of wax on them also, and then paint with the white chalk paint. And I'm going to use the packing tape now, and it just, when you put it on top of that white chalk paint with the wax underneath, when you press down that packing tape into that paint and then you tear it off, it will take little bits of the paint here and there and just give it that really cool kind of distressed look. Now I'm having a little bit of an issue today because it is really humid here, like really humid. It's almost 100 degrees and that tape is not sticking very well. So you're going to see me struggle a little bit, but it does work very well if the humidity is not high. I'm just taking my scraper and just pressing that packing tape right into that paint and getting it adhered to that wax. So when I pull it off, you're going to see it leaves an amazing texture on that paint. And like I said, if it wasn't so humid today, I would have probably a lot better results, but you'll see how well it works in the end if you just be patient and just kind of work away with this technique. Sometimes when you're doing these projects, it doesn't turn out exactly how you want it to because you can't control the weather, but I think it turned out really cool. And you can see some of the paint that it's pulled off on that packing tape and exposed a little bit of that black underneath, and it just gives it a really nice old look. I love using this technique on frames that are really ornate. You can't get into all those little corners with the sandpaper, and you don't want to because you don't want to sand down any of that detail of the frames. So using this, you don't destroy any of the wood, but you're still getting that distressed look. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever used this technique with the packing tape and how it worked out for you. Okay, I've finished up with the packing tape, and now to do a little bit more detail, I'm just going to take the side of my scraper and just lightly scrape away some of that white paint where there was any wax left that didn't come off with the packing tape. And again, that will leave a really cool kind of distressed look on the frame. And you don't want to apply too much pressure to scrape into that wooden frame. You're just trying to remove that top layer with the wax. And I'm just going to keep working away at it until I get to the desired look that I like.
Now that I'm all finished using the packing tape and the little scraper, I'm going to take a Scotch pad and just lightly sand the whole frame, and that will take any rough edges away. It's not going to sand down much, it's just going to kind of give it a nice smooth finish. And I'm just going to work away on these other two frames. And I have the 3 frames all finished, and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. They look so chippy and distressed, but I haven't taken away any of that detail of the actual frame by sanding it down with any coarse sandpapers. I've just done it with the packing tape and with the scraper. Now I'm going to get the insides of the frames ready, and I'm going to scrape them down and distress them, and I'm going to use these really beautiful botanical prints that I got from the graphic fairy to put in the middle of them. To do these graphics, I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat and do my reverse graphic transfer method. I love using this, and I have lots of full tutorials on my channel. I'll put a link up above here and down below if you'd like to try it out, so you can have a full detailed tutorial step by step. My frames and my prints are all finished, and I like to seal everything with a water-based polyacrylic sealer, and it just makes everything pop also when you put this on top. It brings out the little distressed edges and seals it really well for dusting. And I'm loving the way these turned out, and I'm obsessed with these botanical prints. I think they look fabulous with these distressed frames. So if you're out thrifting and you find some frames or you have some in your stash, give this technique a try because it works fantastic. Another thing that I always save from the scrap metal bin are ends of rakes. They turn into really great projects to make into coat hangers or to hang jewelry from. And this one I'm going to put together with a bunch of scrap wood. I had this piece of wood, I think it came off an old antique table. I sealed it up with some penetrating oil, and I had this old chippy piece of baseboard that I'm going to add onto the bottom. I sealed it up with some matte polyacrylic sealer so the paint wouldn't chip off anymore, put on some Gorilla Glue, and I'm going to nail it onto the bottom of that piece of wood. Now, I have no idea where this little bracket came from or what it was off of, but my rake fit perfect into it to hang. So I'm going to screw it into that piece of wood, and then we're going to put the rake into it, and it'll hold it in place. And this was what I was able to create with a bunch of junk. An old rake, a piece off of a table, an old piece of baseboard, and it's a beautiful piece to hang in an entranceway to keep your keys, or you can keep it in the kitchen and hang some utensils on it. It's gorgeous. They're quite ornate, and I'm going to try to bring some of that out with some different colors and some different painting techniques. And they're kind of dirty. I've had them stored in my shed since the summertime. So I'm going to take a wipe and wipe them down really nice and clean, and then get started painting them. This is the first frame that I'm going to work on. I think all of these frames I picked up at a yard sale. I don't think I paid over $1 for any of them. But what I'm going to do with this one first is I'm going to put a coat of my black chalk paint all over the frame and all over my piece of MDF board that fits in the frame. So I'm going to work away on that. My coat of black chalk paint has completely dried, and now I'm going to put a coat of white chalk paint as the top base before I put my graphics on it. So I'll probably put 2 coats of the white on there. Now the reason I put the black on is when I distress it and sand it a little bit before I finish it, I like the black to kind of peek through and give it that antique old feel. That's just my preference. You don't have to put that layer of black on when you're making signs. I just think it makes it look a little bit extra old. And I'm just going to work away and put 2 coats of the white chalk paint on top of this. I'm going to use the candle wax method on this frame. I love this method. This is just a pillar candle from the dollar store that I've cut a piece off of, and you just want to take it, and I like to be really aggressive. Just kind of rub it all along the frame, wherever you think it would naturally wear. And wherever you put the wax, your paint is not going to adhere in those spots. So it's going to make it look rustic and chippy. So I'm just gonna put a whole bunch on here. I want it all in that ornate part, so that will all show through. And you can see I didn't put the black paint everywhere. I kind of left some of the gold peeking through because I want that to show when I sand it all down also. So now that I've got the candle wax on, I'm going to put a coat of my white chalk paint over the whole frame. Okay, my layer of white chalk paint has completely dried, and I kind of like the look of it. It kind of had the stain leach through it a little bit. It's got a really rustic look now. I'm going to, my trick when I'm doing the candle wax technique is to use the heat gun now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up that wax that's underneath that white chalk paint. And then I'm going to take a scraper and I'm going to scrape away, and wherever there's wax, it's going to lift off that paint on the top and leave it nice and chippy and rustic looking. So I'm going to work away on that. Now you can see when I'm scraping, I don't scrape this way, I scrape away and just very lightly. And as you're doing it, you can see that it pulls up all those different colors underneath. There's not really any right or wrong way. You just keep kind of doing it until you like the look of it. And put your picture in it. Okay, this frame is all done, and that's how easy you can create a plain wooden frame into something farmhouse, chippy, and rustic. I'm going to seal this now with a satin-based polyacrylic sealer. Make sure you're using water-based. If you're not using water-based, you're using an oil base, it will yellow on you very quickly over time. So I'm going to put a nice coat over all of it, seal it up. This part's finished, and now I'm going to work away on putting my graphic on the MDF board for the middle. This is the graphics that I have designed, and these are available in my Etsy store. If you want to purchase these after, I'll have the link to all 3 of the graphics in the description. And so I've done this on my LaserJet printer. I've made sure to reverse the text. If you're buying them out of my Etsy store, they're already reversed. You don't need to worry about it. And I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat to do the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer on this sign. I love the way that it turns out, and it's so easy to do once you get the hang of it. When you're doing this technique, you just need to put a light coat on. You don't need very much. You just need just enough to cover all of the graphics, and make sure you go right out to the edge of the paper. That will give you the best results. And just cover your whole piece of paper. I've got this completely coated. I'm going to flip it over, make sure it's centered exactly where I want it. And then I'm just going to rub out any bubbles or wrinkles. And then you're just going to set it aside, and I'm going to let it sit until tomorrow before I take the paper off. This one has sat overnight. I just have a little dish of warm water with a little rag in it, and you just want to dampen it just so you can start to see the graphics come through, and then you're going to rub off all of the paper. I've got all the paper rubbed off this graphic, and now I'm just going to put a coat of my polyacrylic sealer on the top to seal it up really nice. I love the way this frame turned out with the candle wax distressing and then scraping it off. It looks perfect, and a perfect graphic to add into it. Next frame that we're going to work on is this one. I think I am going to just leave this one gold and black. I'm not going to put any white on top of it. And I'm going to do the candle wax technique again. I'm going to put the candle wax right on this frame right now, and then put the black on top of it. The black's all dry. What I'm going to do next, creates an amazing finish, and it's done with packing tape. You just take a piece of packing tape and you press it right into that frame, into all of those grooves. Press it down really well, and then when you peel away, you're going to peel away little bits of paint here and there, so it looks like it's kind of worn off. And I love that look. So I'm going to do that over the whole frame. I'm going to do a little spot here to show you on the ends what it looks like. You're just going to really press it right in there, and then just find the end, peel it off, and that's what you're left with. This technique is so easy to do, no mess. Anywhere where there was a little bit of wax, the tape will peel it off. And anywhere where there's little bits of paint that haven't adhered very well, the tape will peel it off. And you can use the tape more than once. You can kind of use it a couple times, and then it'll take less off when it's less sticky and more off when it's more sticky. You just kind of play around with it, but I love the effect that it gives. This one's all done. I'm going to seal it up with some polyacrylic sealer, and then I'm going to work on the middle piece of MDF board to put the sign on next. I'm now going to do the center board for this frame. I've pulled a lot of gold out in it, so I had some gold acrylic. I think that's what I'm going to do as my base on this one. Do some maybe gold, some black, and then finish it off with a light coat of white. Okay, I changed my mind. I had thought maybe I was going to put some black, some gold, and some white. And then once I finished the gold and I put the frame up with it, I love it. So I'm going to do my graphics right on top of this gold and do the Mod Podge reverse transfer method. So I'm going to get my graphics printed off right now and get them on this board. I've got the next graphic printed off. This has got a lot of farmhouse feel. I love this one. Also available in my Etsy store if you're interested. I've had to print it out on 2 sheets of paper. I have a video on how you can size your graphics if they're bigger than a sheet of paper. I'll put a link down below in the description for how to do that. And it's really simple and really easy to do. So now I'm just going to cut this out, place it where I want it, and put on the Mod Podge for the reverse transfer method. I've got it all on. All the bubbles and wrinkles are pushed out, and I'm going to set it aside till tomorrow, and then we'll finish it off. Okay, now this one is sat for 24 hours. This is the one that I did with the gold background. I'm just going to take my damp cloth and just put the water on it until you can start to see the graphics, and then we're going to rub away. Okay, I've got all the paper rubbed off on this. Sometimes when you're doing this technique, you can find that you might get a little bit of a white haze, especially if you're doing it on a darker background. I usually, when I'm doing this technique, I like to do it on a white background, but I kind of liked the gold with this frame. So what I do if I have a little bit of a white haze that I can't rub off, I will just take the paint that I was using and a little paintbrush and just kind of paint over those little areas, and it'll all blend in and look really nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I've taken all that little white bits of cloudiness away, and if you still see a little tiny bit, you don't have to worry. When you put a coat of the polyacrylic sealer on, it will seal everything all up, and a lot of that will go away. So I'm just going to put a really good coat of polyacrylic sealer on this. I'm so happy I chose the gold background on this. It looks fantastic with the gold accents in the frame. I just love the way that it turned out, and I love this graphic. On to the next one. third frame. I think I kind of want to keep it the wooden color, and it looks like it's had maybe some plaster or something that has been kind of pushed in to these grooves. I'm going to give it a light sanding, bring that all up, get rid of some of this reddish color, just basically clean it up, and then I'm going to coat it with some polyacrylic sealer to seal it all up. I'm just using a 80 grit sanding block, and I've got some finer, I think this might be 120, and I'm just kind of working away on it. And you can see how this is really red, and it's got like a gold tinge to it. What I've done is I've sanded this right down, and it's got rid of all of that gold, which I like much better. And I'm sanding down some of that reddish tinge, and I'm really liking it. A little bit of work, but it's gonna be worth it. I got it all done. I got a coat of the polyacrylic sealer on it. It's not perfect. I didn't get a lot of the red out, but it certainly looks better from when I started. And now I'm gonna paint the inside MDF. I've just squirted on some of my acrylic paint in burnt umber. I'm gonna do that as a base coat, and then I'm gonna put a couple coats of the white chalk paint on top of it. So when I kind of sand it down a little bit, this brown will peek through, and then I'll have the white top. So we're gonna get busy. Okay, I've been struggling to try to get a nice color that I like on this MDF board that's gonna go in this frame. And I didn't like the stark white. I tried to do some kind of dabbing of different colors, and I wasn't really feeling it. And then I thought the color of the frame is almost like a cinnamon color, and that's when I'm trying to get a light cinnamon color. I grab my cinnamon, and I'm just gonna rub it into that MDF board and see what that looks like as a base before I put my graphics on. Sometimes you just have to play around with different techniques and different, just try different things, and sometimes you're surprised with how it turns out. And I kind of really like the color that this is turning. I'm just rubbing it into the paint. Isn't quite dry. It's still a little bit damp, so that gives the cinnamon something to kind of stick to. I'm just kind of just rubbing it all over, and then I'll brush off the extra cinnamon that's not staying on, and we'll be ready to put a graphic on it. And I think that will give me the color that I'm gonna like. Okay, I really like it. It gives it a really kind of aged antique look. Perfect base for my graphics. And you can put your graphics right on top of this. There's hardly any cinnamon left on this paint. It's just kind of worn right into it. So when we're doing the transfer technique, it won't rub off the cinnamon. It'll work perfect. So next step, graphics. I printed my graphics all off, the same as all the other times on my LaserJet printer. This is the graphic that I'm going to use, but we have to reverse it. So I've sized it because this is bigger than a sheet of paper. I have the tutorial. I'll put that down below so you can figure out how to make your graphics bigger. And we're going to use the Mod Podge mat and put it on the MDF board. Okay, now we're going to work on the last one where I did the background with a little bit of that cinnamon color. I'm just going to take my damp rag and just dampen it until I can start to see the graphics show through. And then we're going to rub off all of that paper. I've got all the paper rubbed off of this. Gonna put a nice coat of polyacrylic sealer on the top, and then we're ready to put it in the frame. Adding the cinnamon into that paint gave it that extra special touch that it needed. And I love that I just kept the frame kind of natural and just sanded it down a little bit. I love it.
I'm really happy with the way all three of these frames turned out. And like I said before, I've probably paid $1 for each frame, and I had some scrap MDF that I cut to size to fit the frames, so they are really affordable to make. Sometimes I get the best results just trial and error, trying out different things, and they turn out in the end exactly how I want them to. Who would have thought that cinnamon would take this picture to the next level? I think it looks fantastic. Is this little mirror that I picked up at the thrift store. I think it probably originally came from the dollar store. It was 50 cents. I picked it up. I'm going to turn it into some boho beautiful decor. I took the mirror out and I'm going to use some macrame cord. I had some cord left over from a project and it wasn't enough to do another hanger, so I'm going to use it on this thrift flip. I'm going to cut a whole bunch of pieces the same length because we're going to do a lark's head knot all around the outside of that frame. Now that I've gotten them cut all to the length that I want, we're just going to start putting those all around that little plastic frame. These were made quite cheap from the dollar store, and by adding this fringe on it, it's going to really make it look high-end, and it's really simple to do. Might take 15 or 20 minutes to put together. And if you don't have any macrame cord, you can use twine, you can use yarn, you can use cut up fabric, just use your imagination. If you want to use some macrame cord, I'll put a link down below in the description for my favorite. I've got them all tied on around the whole outside of that plastic frame. Now we're going to unravel all those ends so they can be nice and full. Grab a coffee or a tea and work away at this. I actually find it quite relaxing. I'm going to now just take my comb and brush it all out, and then we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut all around the outside to make sure that it's all the same length. I'm just using my ruler here to use as I cut along, so I'm making sure that it's going to be all even. And make sure you have a really sharp pair of scissors. These ones aren't probably the sharpest. If you had a rotary cutter, that would probably work really perfect too, and you could do it right on a cutting board. Now we're ready to glue that mirror onto the back of that frame just with some hot glue, and it is beautiful. It looks so much better than that 50-cent mirror that I picked up at the thrift store. It now looks like a beautiful high-end piece of decor.